How to force yourself to improve every day. Improvement is not a destination. It's not a mountain peak you reach once and declare victory. It's not a medal you win or a certificate you hang on your wall. Improvement is a daily decision, a moment-by-moment commitment to becoming something more than you were yesterday. And for most people, it's the hardest thing they'll ever attempt to master. You see, the human brain is wired for comfort, for the familiar, for the path of least resistance. It craves predictability like a moth craves light. Your mind wants to keep you safe in the warm cocoon of routine, where every action is automatic and every choice is predetermined by the patterns you've already established. But here's the brutal truth. Comfort is the enemy of growth. Safety is the assassin of potential. And if you're not moving forward, you're not standing still, you're moving backward. This audiobook is not about motivation. Motivation is fleeting, unreliable, like trying to capture smoke with your bare hands. This is about something far more powerful and infinitely more dangerous. The science of systematic improvement, the psychology of forcing change when your mind screams for the familiar, the neuroscience of rewiring your brain to crave progress instead of comfort. Research consistently shows that mere repetition of a simple action in a consistent context leads through associative learning to the action being activated upon subsequent exposure to those contextual cues. What this means is that your brain is always changing, always adapting, always creating new pathways based on what you repeatedly do. The question is, are you consciously directing that change, or are you letting it happen by default? Over the next several hours, we will dive deep into the mechanisms of human change. You'll discover why habit formation takes around 66 days on average, not the mythical 21 days that most people believe. You'll learn how to harness the compound effect of daily improvement, where small changes accumulate into extraordinary transformations. And you'll master the art of identity-based change, where you don't just adopt new behaviors, you become a fundamentally different person. This is not gentle self-help. This is not about being kind to yourself when you fail. This is about developing the psychological tools to force improvement, even when every fiber of your being wants to quit. This is about becoming the kind of person who improves not because it feels good, but because it's who you are. Chapter 1. The Neuroscience of Daily Change. Your brain is not fixed. This simple statement revolutionizes everything we understand about human potential. For decades, scientists believed that the adult brain was essentially static, that the neural pathways formed in childhood determined your capabilities for life. But modern neuroscience has shattered this limiting belief with overwhelming evidence of neuroplasticity, the brain's remarkable ability to reorganize itself throughout your entire life. Exercise physically elevates a specific protein in the brain that researchers call miracle grow for the brain, literally changing the physical structure of your neural networks. But it's not just exercise. Every habit you form, every skill you practice, every thought pattern you repeat is physically rewiring your brain. The pathways that fire together, wire together, and the pathways you don't use, they begin to fade, like unused roads being reclaimed by nature. This neuroplasticity is both your greatest opportunity and your greatest challenge. Every day, your brain is changing, whether you direct that change or not. Patterns of thoughts and actions repeated many times create a neurosignature, or a brain groove, a series of interconnected neurons that carry the thought patterns of a particular habit. If you're not intentionally creating positive grooves, your brain is creating negative ones by default. Think about how this plays out in your daily life. When you wake up and immediately check your phone, you're strengthening the neural pathway that connects waking up with digital distraction. When you feel stressed and reach for comfort food, you're reinforcing the connection between emotional discomfort and eating. When you tell yourself, "I'm not good at this," when facing a challenge, you're literally rewiring your brain to believe in your own limitations. But here's where the science becomes empowering. If we stop giving attention to the bad habits, those grooves weaken. When we form new habits, we drive new grooves deeper with each repetition, eventually overpowering the previous ones. Your brain is remarkably democratic in this process. It doesn't judge whether a habit is good or bad for you. It simply strengthens whatever you repeatedly practice. The implications of this are staggering. It means that every single day, through your choices and actions, you are literally sculpting your future self. You are the architect of your own neural architecture. You are designing the person you will become tomorrow, next week, next year. The only question is whether you're doing this consciously or unconsciously. Studies tracking habit formation over 1110 days show a significant increase of about 0.8 standard deviations in habit strength, with stronger increases in the beginning of the study period, leveling off at the end. This research reveals something crucial about the improvement process. The early days are where the real work happens. The first few weeks of establishing any new habit are when your brain is most resistant, when the old neural pathways are fighting hardest to maintain their dominance. This is why most people fail at improvement. They expect the process to get easier over time, but the truth is exactly the opposite. The beginning is the hardest part. Your brain will throw every obstacle it can at you during those first crucial weeks. It will make you tired when you need energy, distracted when you need focus, and discouraged when you need determination. It's not personal, it's neurological. Your brain is literally protecting what it perceives as your survival by maintaining familiar patterns. Understanding this neurological reality is the first step in forcing improvement. When you know that resistance is not a character flaw, but a predictable neurological response, you can prepare for it. When you understand that the discomfort you feel when trying to change is actually the feeling of your brain creating new pathways, you can welcome that discomfort as a sign of growth. The key insight from neuroscience research is this: your brain changes more rapidly when you consistently practice behaviors that require focused attention and effort. Aerobic activity has a dramatic effect on adaptation, regulating systems that might be out of balance and optimizing those that are not. This is why combining physical exercise with mental challenges creates such powerful neuroplasticity. Your brain literally grows new connections faster when your body is also being challenged. But perhaps the most profound discovery in modern neuroscience is that the act of believing you can change actually changes your brain's receptivity to change. When you adopt what researchers call a growth mindset, the belief that your abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work, your brain becomes more plastic, more adaptable, more willing to form new connections. This is not positive thinking nonsense. This is measurable, observable, scientifically validated change in brain structure and function. Your beliefs about your capacity for change literally alter your capacity for change, which means that the very act of committing to daily improvement begins to rewire your brain for improvement. Chapter 2: The Compound Effect Unleashed. There's a mathematical principle that most people understand intellectually but rarely grasp emotionally: the power of compound growth. If you improve by just 1% every day for a year, you don't end up 1% better, you end up 37 times better. This isn't motivational mathematics, this is cold, hard, numerical reality. James Clear made it abundantly clear that if an individual decides and implements the strategy to get 1% better every day for 1 year, they will end up 37% better by the end of it. But even this understates the true power of the compound effect when it comes to human improvement. Because improvement isn't just additive, it's exponential. Each small improvement makes the next improvement easier, faster, and more effective. Consider what happens when you commit to reading just 10 pages of a challenging book every day. At first, those 10 pages might take you an hour. You're struggling with unfamiliar concepts, looking up words, rereading paragraphs to understand their meaning. But after a few weeks, something shifts. Your vocabulary has expanded, your comprehension speed has increased, your background knowledge has grown. Those 10 pages that once took an hour now take 40 minutes, and the knowledge you're gaining compounds on itself, making each new page more meaningful than the last. This is the compound effect in action. Dr. Joseph Murphy, a neuroscience researcher, notes, reading literally changes your brain, creating new white matter that improves communication within the brain. Just 20 minutes per day physically rebuilds your neural network. You're not just accumulating information, you're literally rewiring your brain for better learning. The same principle applies to physical fitness. The first week of exercise is brutal. Your muscles ache, your cardiovascular system protests. Every fiber of your being wants to quit. But as you continue, your body adapts. Your heart becomes more efficient. Your muscles grow stronger. Your endurance improves. What once seemed impossible becomes routine. And then something magical happens. Your body begins to crave the very exercise it once resisted. But here's where most people misunderstand the compound effect. They think it's about the big, visible improvements. They focus on the dramatic transformation stories, the before and after photos, the success stories that make headlines. But the real power of compounding happens in the invisible phases, during what researchers call the valley of latent potential. The progress we experience from the compounding effect of any habit isn't immediately visible. As a result, people give up quickly. They don't realize that every day they show up, they're building momentum. They are moving closer and closer to a breakthrough or inflection point. Think of an ice cube sitting in a room. If the room temperature is 31 degrees Fahrenheit, nothing seems to happen. The ice remains solid, unchanged, apparently unaffected by the environment. But if the temperature increases to just 32 degrees, a change of just 1 degree, everything transforms. The ice begins to melt. The same substance that was rigid and unchangeable becomes fluid and adaptable. This is exactly how human improvement works. You might practice a skill for weeks without seeing dramatic improvement. You might work on a habit for months without feeling transformed. But underneath the surface, invisible changes are accumulating. Neural pathways are strengthening, cellular adaptations are occurring, psychological patterns are shifting. And then, suddenly, everything clicks. What seemed impossible becomes effortless. What felt like struggle becomes flow. Warren Buffett didn't build his fortune through sudden windfalls. Instead, he followed the principle of compounding returns, turning small investments into billions. His approach was simple: make consistently good decisions, and let time do the heavy lifting. He understood that massive results come not from massive actions, but from small actions performed consistently over long periods. The same principle that creates billionaires can create excellence in any area of your life. But it requires a fundamental shift in how you think about improvement. Instead of asking, "What can I do today to get dramatic results?" you must ask, "What can I do today that, if repeated consistently, will compound into extraordinary results?" This shift in thinking is both liberating and demanding. Liberating because it means you don't need to make dramatic changes to create dramatic results. Demanding because it requires the discipline to do small things consistently when you can't yet see their impact. Small daily effort and improvement creates big, massive change over time. So just set micro and nano goals for each day. Chances are, you'll find you become more motivated after starting a task, often resulting in overshooting your daily goals. This is another crucial insight. The compound effect creates its own momentum. As you begin to see small results, your motivation increases. As your motivation increases, your consistency improves. As your consistency improves, your results accelerate. But perhaps the most profound aspect of the compound effect is how it changes your identity. When you commit to daily improvement, you're not just changing what you do, you're changing who you are. Each day you choose improvement over comfort, discipline over impulse, growth over stagnation. You're providing evidence to yourself that you are the kind of person who improves. And as this evidence accumulates, your self-image transforms. You begin to see yourself not as someone who is trying to improve, but as someone who simply improves. It becomes part of your identity, as natural and automatic as breathing. This identity shift is where the compound effect becomes truly unstoppable. Because once improvement becomes part of who you are, rather than something you do, it stops requiring willpower or motivation. It becomes as natural as any other aspect of your personality. You don't have to force yourself to be kind if you're a kind person. You don't have to motivate yourself to be honest if you're an honest person. And you don't have to push yourself to improve if you're someone who simply improves. Chapter 3: The Architecture of Atomic Habits. When it comes to building habits that last, when it comes to building a system of 1% improvements, the problem is not that one level is better or worse than another. All levels of change are useful in their own way. The problem is the direction of change. Most people approach habit formation backwards. They focus on what they want to achieve, instead of who they want to become. This backward approach is why New Year's resolutions fail spectacularly. People set outcome-based goals. I want to lose 20 pounds, I want to make more money, I want to learn a new language. but they haven't changed their identity to match these aspirations. They're still the same person trying to do different things, rather than becoming a different person for whom these things are natural. The alternative is to build identity-based habits. With this approach, we start by focusing on who we wish to become. Instead of saying, "I want to lose weight," you ask, "What would a healthy person do?" Instead of saying, "I want to learn Spanish," you ask, "What would a Spanish speaker do?" Instead of saying, "I want to be successful," you ask, "What would a successful person do?" This shift from outcome-based to identity-based thinking is not semantic, it's psychological. When your habits are tied to your identity, they become self-reinforcing. Each time you write a page, you are a writer. Each time you practice the violin, you are a musician. Each time you start a workout, you are an athlete. Each time you encourage your employees, you are a leader. Every action becomes a vote for the type of person you want to become. But how exactly do you build these identity-based habits? The process involves understanding what researchers call the habit loop, a neurological cycle that governs all habitual behavior. MIT researchers discovered a three-step neurological pattern that forms the core of every habit: the cue, the routine, and the reward. The cue is the trigger that initiates the behavior. It could be a time of day, an emotional state, a physical location, or the presence of other people. The routine is the behavior itself, what you actually do. The reward is the benefit you gain from the behavior, which could be physical, emotional, or social. Understanding this loop is crucial because it reveals why habits are so powerful and why they can be so difficult to change. Once a habit is established, your brain begins to anticipate the reward as soon as it recognizes the cue. This anticipation creates what researchers call a craving, a neurological urge that drives behavior almost automatically. But here's where most people misunderstand habit formation. They think willpower is what creates habits. They believe that if they just try hard enough, want something badly enough, or discipline themselves strictly enough, they can force new behaviors to stick. This approach is not only ineffective, it's counterproductive. When tasks feel easier, you're more likely to follow through. Progress-focused goals remove the mental barriers that perfectionist thinking creates. The secret to building lasting habits is not willpower, it's system design. You must engineer your environment and your routines so that good habits are easier and bad habits are harder. This is what researchers call environmental design, and it's far more powerful than motivation or discipline. Consider the simple habit of drinking more water. Instead of relying on willpower to remember to drink water throughout the day, you redesign your environment. You fill a large water bottle and place it on your desk where you can't miss it. You set reminders on your phone. You create a rule that you must drink a glass of water before each meal. You're not trying to force yourself to want water. You're making it easier to drink water and harder to forget about it. This principle applies to every habit you want to build. Want to exercise more? Lay out your workout clothes the night before. Want to read more? Keep a book on your pillow so you see it when you go to bed. Want to eat healthier? Pre-cut vegetables and keep them at eye level in your refrigerator. You're not changing your desires, you're changing your environment to support your desires. But environmental design is only the beginning. The real power of habit formation comes from understanding how to stack new habits onto existing ones. Habit stacking involves linking a new habit to an existing daily routine or specific time. This works because you're leveraging the neural pathways you've already established rather than trying to create entirely new ones. For example, if you already brush your teeth every morning, you can stack a new habit onto this routine. After I brush my teeth, I will do 10 push-ups. The existing habit becomes the cue for the new habit. Your brain doesn't have to remember a new trigger because it's already programmed to brush your teeth. You're simply adding one more step to an existing routine. Researchers found that both routine-based cues and time-based cues were effective in increasing habit automaticity, with repeated enactment of the planned behavior being the strongest predictor of success. This research reveals something crucial. Consistency trumps intensity every time. It's better to do something small every day than something big once a week. This insight challenges the way most people think about improvement. We're conditioned to believe that bigger is better, that more effort equals more results. But when it comes to habit formation, The opposite is true. Research has found that starting with an easy goal and then building gradually is what makes you most likely to achieve it and stick to it. The reason small habits are so powerful is that they slip under your brain's resistance radar. Your brain doesn't see a 2-minute habit as a threat, so it doesn't activate the same resistance mechanisms that it would for a major lifestyle change. But once the small habit is established, it becomes a gateway to larger behaviors. You start by flossing one tooth, but once you're in the bathroom with floss in your hand, you often end up flossing all your teeth. You start by reading one page, but once the book is open, you often read several pages. This is what James Clear calls the 2-minute rule. When starting a new habit, scale it down to something that takes less than 2 minutes to complete. Read before bed becomes read one page before bed. Exercise daily becomes put on my running shoes daily. Meditate for 20 minutes becomes sit in meditation posture for 1 minute. The 2-minute rule works because it's based on a fundamental principle of behavior change. You must establish the habit before you can improve the habit. You can't optimize a habit that doesn't exist. Most people try to do both simultaneously, establish and optimize, which overwhelms their capacity for change and leads to failure. But there's an even deeper principle at work here. Your identity emerges out of your habits. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. When you floss one tooth, you're voting for being a person who takes care of their health. When you read one page, you're voting for being a person who values learning. When you do one push-up, you're voting for being a person who is physically active. These votes might seem insignificant individually, but they accumulate over time. As the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. This is one reason why meaningful change does not require radical change. Small habits can make a meaningful difference by providing evidence of a new identity. This voting metaphor is profound because it reframes every small action as significant. You're not just trying to build habits, you're literally constructing a new version of yourself, one small choice at a time. Each time you choose the habit over the impulse, the long-term over the immediate, the growth over the comfort, you're providing evidence to yourself that you are the type of person who makes good choices. And as this evidence accumulates, something remarkable happens. The habits stop feeling like discipline and start feeling like identity. You don't have to force yourself to brush your teeth because you're the kind of person who has good dental hygiene. You don't have to motivate yourself to exercise because you're an athlete. You don't have to push yourself to read because you're a learner. This identity-based approach to habit formation is not just more effective, it's more sustainable. Habits that are tied to your identity are remarkably difficult to break, because breaking them would require you to act against who you believe yourself to be. And most people will go to extraordinary lengths to remain consistent with their self-image. Chapter 4. The Psychology of Resistance. Every attempt at improvement triggers a predictable psychological response. Resistance. This resistance is not a character flaw or a sign of weakness. It's a fundamental feature of the human psyche, as natural and inevitable as gravity. Understanding this resistance, where it comes from, how it manifests, and why it's actually essential for growth, is crucial for anyone serious about daily improvement. Resistance shows up differently for different people, but its core function is always the same: to protect the status quo. Your brain has invested enormous energy in creating the person you are today. Every neural pathway, every habit pattern, every automatic response represents countless hours of reinforcement and optimization. From your brain's perspective, you are a masterpiece of adaptation, perfectly calibrated to survive in your environment. Any change, even positive change, represents a potential threat to this carefully constructed system. This is why improvement feels dangerous to your psyche. On a conscious level, you know that exercising will make you healthier, that learning new skills will advance your career, that developing better relationships will increase your happiness. But on an unconscious level, your brain interprets these changes as existential threats. What if this new version of you can't survive? What if these new patterns are less effective than the old ones? What if change leads to rejection, failure, or loss? These fears are rarely rational, but they don't need to be rational to be powerful. Fear doesn't operate in the logical centers of your brain. It operates in the primitive centers that prioritize survival above all else. And from a survival perspective, the familiar is always safer than the unknown, no matter how limiting the familiar might be. This survival mechanism explains why resistance intensifies just as you're beginning to make progress. You start exercising regularly for 2 weeks, and then suddenly you feel overwhelmed with work and stop. You begin waking up earlier for a month, and then convince yourself you need more sleep. You start eating healthier for 3 weeks, and then have a cheat day that turns into a cheat week. This isn't self-sabotage in the traditional sense, it's your brain's attempt to return to the safety of known patterns. Perfectionism can drive impossibly high standards and have dangerous consequences. Maintaining that flawless veneer can put your mental and physical well-being at risk as you search for that perfect life. One of the most common forms of resistance is perfectionism. Your brain convinces you that if you can't do something perfectly, you shouldn't do it at all. If you miss one workout, you might as well quit the gym. If you eat one unhealthy meal, your diet is ruined. If you skip reading for one day, there's no point in continuing the habit. This all-or-nothing thinking is resistance disguised as high standards. It's your brain's way of giving you permission to quit by setting impossible standards for success. Research published in the journal Personality and Individual Differences shows that perfectionists are more likely to procrastinate and experience emotional exhaustion because their high standards become paralyzing rather than motivating. Another common form of resistance is what psychologists call hedonic adaptation, the tendency for positive changes to feel less positive over time. When you start a new habit, it feels significant and meaningful. You're proud of yourself for making the change. You feel optimistic about your future. But after a few weeks, the novelty wears off. The habit becomes routine. The emotional reward diminishes, and your brain begins to question whether the effort is worth it. This is where most people give up. They interpret the reduction in emotional reward as a sign that the habit isn't working or isn't important. But hedonic adaptation is actually a sign that the habit is working perfectly. When a behavior stops feeling special and starts feeling normal, it means you've successfully programmed it into your automatic behavioral repertoire. The goal is not to feel amazing about your habits forever. The goal is to make them so natural that they require no emotional investment at all. Understanding resistance also means understanding that it will never fully disappear. Even people who have been improving consistently for years still experience resistance. The difference is that they've learned to recognize resistance as information rather than instruction. When resistance shows up, experienced improvers don't see it as a reason to stop. They see it as feedback about their current capacity and an opportunity to strengthen their resilience. This reframe is crucial because it transforms resistance from an enemy into an ally. Resistance reveals exactly where your growth edge is. The things you resist most strongly are often the things that will benefit you most profoundly. The workout you don't want to do is probably the workout your body needs most. The conversation you're avoiding is probably the conversation that will strengthen your relationship most. The skill you're intimidated by is probably the skill that will advance your career most. But working with resistance effectively requires more than just understanding it intellectually. It requires developing specific strategies for moving through resistance when it arises. The most effective strategy is what psychologists call the minimum viable dose, doing the smallest possible version of the desired behavior, even when you don't want to do it at all. If you're supposed to run for 30 minutes but you're feeling resistant, commit to putting on your running shoes. If you're supposed to write for an hour but you're feeling blocked, commit to writing one sentence. If you're supposed to practice piano for 20 minutes but you're feeling overwhelmed, commit to playing one scale. The key is to never let resistance stop you from doing something. Let it only reduce the scope of what you do. This approach works because it maintains the habit structure even when motivation is low. You're still honoring your commitment to yourself, still providing evidence of your new identity, still strengthening the neural pathways associated with the behavior. And often, once you start with the minimum viable dose, you find yourself naturally doing more. Putting on your running shoes leads to a short walk, which leads to a light jog. Writing one sentence leads to a paragraph, which leads to a page. But even when the minimum viable dose doesn't lead to more, it's still a complete victory. Because the real battle is not between doing something well and doing something poorly. It's between doing something and doing nothing. Every time you choose action over avoidance, progress over perfection, showing up over staying comfortable, you're winning the only battle that truly matters. the battle against resistance itself. The more you practice moving through resistance, the less power it has over you. Your brain begins to learn that resistance is not dangerous, that change doesn't threaten survival, that growth actually enhances security rather than threatening it. Resistance doesn't disappear, but it transforms from an overwhelming force into a manageable feeling. It becomes like background music that you notice but that doesn't control your behavior. This transformation requires patience and self-compassion. Most people try to overcome resistance through force, through sheer willpower, through gritting their teeth and pushing through. But resistance to resistance only creates more resistance. The more you fight against the feeling of not wanting to do something, the stronger that feeling becomes. Instead, the most effective approach is to acknowledge resistance, without judgment. Thank it for trying to protect you, and then gently move forward anyway. This doesn't mean you have to feel good about taking action. It means you take action regardless of how you feel. When you allow yourself to rest, acknowledge your progress, and engage in positive self-talk, you're much less likely to burn out and more likely to achieve your goals without sacrificing your health and quality of life along the way. Ultimately, learning to work with resistance is one of the most valuable skills you can develop, because resistance is not limited to habit formation. It shows up anytime you try to grow, change, or challenge yourself. Resistance appears when you're learning a new skill, starting a difficult project, having a challenging conversation, or stepping outside your comfort zone in any way. The ability to feel resistance fully and move forward anyway is the foundation of all personal development. This skill is what separates people who improve consistently from people who improve sporadically. Both groups experience resistance. Both groups have days when they don't feel like doing the work, but one group has learned to act in spite of resistance, while the other group allows resistance to dictate their behavior. And over time, this difference in how they relate to resistance creates dramatically different life trajectories. The people who learn to dance with resistance become unstoppable, not because they never feel like quitting, because they feel like quitting and keep going anyway. Not because change becomes easy, because they become stronger than their discomfort. Not because resistance disappears, because they become friends with the very force that used to stop them. Chapter 5: Identity-Based Transformation. The deepest level of change happens when you stop trying to change what you do and start changing who you are. This shift from behavior-focused improvement to identity-focused improvement is not just more effective, it's the only way to create lasting transformation that doesn't require constant willpower and motivation. The interior of behavior change and building better habits is your identity. Each action you perform is driven by the fundamental belief that it is possible. So if you change your identities, then it's easier to change your actions. This insight reveals why most improvement attempts fail. People try to change their behaviors without changing their beliefs about themselves. Think about how this plays out in practice. Someone wants to lose weight, so they go on a diet, but deep down, they still see themselves as someone who struggles with food, someone who has always been overweight, someone whose family has bad genes for weight management. Despite their temporary dietary changes, their fundamental identity remains unchanged. So when the diet becomes difficult or social pressures arise, they default back to behaviors that are consistent with how they see themselves. Contrast this with someone who focuses on identity change first. Instead of going on a diet, they begin to see themselves as a healthy person. They ask, what would a healthy person eat for breakfast? How would a healthy person respond to stress? What would a healthy person do when they're tired? They're not following an external set of rules, they're acting in accordance with their internal identity. This identity-based approach is far more powerful because it aligns your conscious goals with your unconscious self-image. Your current behaviors are a pretty accurate reflection of your current identity, whether you're aware of it or not. When there's a conflict between your identity and your goals, identity always wins. Your brain will find ways to sabotage behaviors that feel inconsistent with who you believe yourself to be. But how exactly do you change your identity? How do you become someone different than who you've always been? The process involves understanding that identity is not fixed, it's constructed through evidence. Whatever your identity is right now, you only believe it because you have proof of it. If you go to church every Sunday, you have evidence that you're religious. If you exercise regularly, you have evidence that you're athletic. If you read consistently, you have evidence that you're a learner. The profound implication of this is that you can change your identity by changing your evidence. Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you want to become. No single instance will transform your beliefs, but as the votes build up, so does the evidence of your new identity. This is why small, consistent actions are so much more powerful than grand gestures. A single intense workout doesn't make you an athlete, but working out consistently for months provides overwhelming evidence that you are someone who prioritizes fitness. This voting metaphor is crucial because it reframes every small choice as significant. When you choose to read instead of watching television, you're not just learning something new, you're voting for being an intellectually curious person. When you choose to have a difficult conversation instead of avoiding conflict, you're not just solving a problem, you're voting for being someone who faces challenges directly. When you choose to save money instead of spending impulsively, you're not just improving your finances, you're voting for being someone who thinks long-term. The power of this approach becomes clear when you understand how identity shapes behavior at an unconscious level. If you make your own meals every day, you are a cook. If you use a daily to-do list, you are a planner. If you tend a garden daily, you are a gardener. These identities feel natural because they're supported by consistent evidence. And once an identity feels natural, the behaviors associated with it require no willpower at all. This is why identity-based change is so sustainable. When you're trying to change behaviors without changing identity, you're constantly swimming against the current of your self-image. It's exhausting and ultimately unsustainable. But when you change your identity first, the behaviors flow naturally from who you believe yourself to be. You don't have to force yourself to act like a healthy person when you genuinely believe you are a healthy person. But identity change requires patience because identities shift slowly. Changing your beliefs isn't nearly as hard as you might think. There are 2 steps. First, you must decide who you want to become. Second, you must prove it to yourself with small wins. The first step, deciding who you want to become, requires clarity about your values and vision for your future self. Instead of setting goals like "I want to lose 20 pounds", you set identity goals like "I want to become someone who takes excellent care of their health". Instead of "I want to make more money", you choose "I want to become someone who creates value for others". Instead of "I want to learn Spanish", you commit to "I want to become someone who connects with people from different cultures". Notice how these identity-based goals are process-oriented rather than outcome-oriented. They focus on who you're becoming rather than what you're achieving. This shift in focus is powerful because it makes every action relevant to your goal. A healthy person makes good choices in every meal, every workout, every moment of stress. A valuable person looks for ways to help others in every interaction, every project, every opportunity. A culturally connected person practices language skills, seeks diverse perspectives, and embraces unfamiliar experiences. The second step, proving it to yourself with small wins, is where most people struggle. They want to see immediate, dramatic evidence of their new identity. But real identity change happens through accumulation, not transformation. Small habits can make a meaningful difference by providing evidence of a new identity. And if a change is meaningful, it actually is big. This is why the daily improvement approach is so perfectly suited for identity change. Every day you show up, you're providing evidence of who you're becoming. Every day you choose growth over comfort. You're proving to yourself that you're someone who grows. Every day you prioritize long-term benefits over immediate pleasures. You're demonstrating that you're someone who thinks strategically. The beauty of this process is that it becomes self-reinforcing. As your evidence for your new identity accumulates, your confidence in that identity grows. As your confidence grows, acting in accordance with that identity becomes easier. As the behaviors become easier, you gather more evidence which strengthens the identity further. You create an upward spiral of identity reinforcement that becomes incredibly difficult to break. But this process also reveals why most people fail at sustained improvement. They focus on outcomes rather than identity. They measure their success by external metrics, pounds lost, money earned, skills acquired, rather than by internal metrics: who they're becoming, how they're growing, what kind of person they're proving themselves to be. External metrics are important for tracking progress, but they're terrible for sustaining motivation. External results fluctuate based on factors outside your control. You can eat perfectly and not lose weight due to hormonal changes. You can work brilliantly and not get promoted due to office politics. You can practice diligently and not improve quickly due to the complexity of the skill. But identity metrics are always under your control. You can always vote for being the kind of person you want to become, regardless of external circumstances. You can always choose to act like a healthy person, even if the scale doesn't cooperate. You can always behave like a valuable professional, even if your boss doesn't recognize it immediately. You can always practice like a dedicated learner, even if your progress feels slow. This shift from external validation to internal validation is liberating because it makes you independent of circumstances. Your improvement no longer depends on getting good results. It depends on becoming a good person. Your success no longer depends on external recognition. It depends on internal consistency. Your growth no longer depends on favorable conditions. It depends on favorable choices. When you know you're improving, it can feel much easier to continue on. This is why identity-based improvement is so sustainable. When your sense of progress is tied to who you're becoming rather than what you're achieving, you can maintain momentum even during difficult periods. You can feel successful even when external results are slow. You can stay motivated even when circumstances are challenging. The ultimate goal of identity-based improvement is to reach a point where growth becomes as natural and automatic as breathing. You don't have to think about being a healthy person, you just are one. You don't have to motivate yourself to be productive. Productivity is simply how you operate. You don't have to remind yourself to be kind. Kindness is who you are. This level of integration takes time, but it's absolutely achievable. Every day, you choose to act in accordance with your desired identity. You make that identity a little more real. Every day, you provide evidence of who you're becoming. You strengthen the neural pathways associated with that identity. Every day, you prove to yourself that you can be the person you want to be. You make it a little easier to be that person tomorrow. The transformation from trying to improve to simply being someone who improves is one of the most profound shifts you can make in your life. It changes improvement from something you do to something you are. It changes growth from a goal you pursue to an identity you embody. It changes becoming better from a destination you're trying to reach to a way of traveling through life. This is the deepest promise of daily improvement. Not just that you'll achieve better results, but that you'll become a better person. Not just that you'll reach your goals, but that you'll transform into someone for whom reaching goals is natural. Not just that you'll improve your circumstances, but that you'll improve yourself in ways that make any circumstances more manageable, more meaningful, and more fulfilling. Chapter 6. The Science of Micro-Improvements. The human mind is poorly equipped to appreciate the power of small changes. We're wired to notice dramatic differences, sudden shifts, and obvious transformations. A 50% improvement captures our attention, but a 1% improvement barely registers. This cognitive bias toward the dramatic is one of the primary reasons why most people underestimate the power of micro-improvements and overestimate the importance of major changes. Small daily effort and improvement creates big, massive change over time. So just set micro and nano goals for each day. Chances are, you'll find you become more motivated after starting a task, often resulting in overshooting your daily goals. This insight reveals something profound about human psychology. We consistently underestimate our ability to change gradually, and overestimate our ability to change dramatically. Consider the mathematics of marginal gains. If you improve by just 0.1% each day, an improvement so small you can barely measure it, you would be 44% better after 1 year. If you manage 0.5% daily improvement, you would be nearly 6 times better, and if you achieve 1% daily improvement, you would be 37 times better by year's end. These aren't theoretical calculations, they're mathematical realities that compound relentlessly, whether you notice them or not. But the power of micro-improvements extends far beyond mathematics into neuroscience and psychology. When you're constantly learning new information, you're stacking skills and making new connections you otherwise wouldn't have. Skill building creates numerous new relationships between ideas and knowledge, which act like bridges between the dots and can spark innovative thinking. Each small improvement doesn't just add to your existing capabilities, it multiplies them by creating new connections and possibilities. Think about how this plays out in learning a language. When you learn your first 10 words in a foreign language, you can't communicate much. When you learn your next 10 words, you can form simple phrases. But when you learn your third set of 10 words, something magical happens. You can start combining words in ways that create meaning, beyond what you've explicitly learned. The words begin to interact, creating exponential rather than linear growth in your communication ability. This exponential effect occurs because micro-improvements are cumulative and interconnected. Each small gain provides a foundation for the next improvement. Each new skill makes learning related skills easier. Each strengthened habit makes building similar habits more automatic. You're not just adding improvements, you're building an infrastructure for improvement. Breaking down tasks into smaller, manageable steps reduces cognitive load, the mental effort required to make decisions. When tasks feel easier, you're more likely to follow through. This research insight explains why micro-improvements are so much more sustainable than macro changes. Your brain perceives small improvements as non-threatening, which reduces the psychological resistance that sabotages larger change attempts. When you commit to reading 1 page per day, your brain doesn't activate the same resistance mechanisms it would read for an hour daily. When you decide to do 5 push-ups each morning, you bypass the mental barriers that would arise from exercise for 45 minutes daily. Your brain's threat detection system is calibrated to notice significant changes in routine and energy expenditure. By keeping improvements below this threshold, you can install new behaviors without triggering defensive responses. This stealth approach to change is particularly powerful because it allows you to establish momentum before resistance fully mobilizes. By the time your brain recognizes that you're changing, the new behavior has already begun to feel normal. You've created what researchers call automaticity, the point at which behaviors begin to feel natural rather than effortful. Research found that on average, it took about 59 days for participants who successfully formed habits to reach peak automaticity. This finding is crucial because it reveals that the most challenging period of any improvement effort is temporary. The first 2 months require conscious effort and decision-making. But after that point, the behavior begins to feel as natural as brushing your teeth or checking your email. But micro-improvements are powerful, not just because they're easier to sustain, they're powerful because they change your relationship with improvement itself. When you consistently achieve small daily wins, you begin to trust your ability to change. Each habit not only gets results, but also teaches you something far more important: to trust yourself. You start to believe you can actually accomplish these things. This growing self-efficacy is perhaps the most valuable outcome of the micro-improvement approach. Self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance attainments, is one of the strongest predictors of success in any domain. Each small accomplishment strengthens your confidence and reduces your fear of failure. And confidence built through micro-improvements is particularly robust because it's based on consistent evidence rather than peak experiences. Most people try to build confidence through major achievements: losing 30 pounds, running a marathon, earning a promotion. While these achievements can certainly boost confidence, they're unreliable foundation builders because they're infrequent and often dependent on external factors. Micro-improvements, in contrast, provide daily evidence of your competence and consistency. This steady accumulation of proof creates unshakable confidence in your ability to improve. The micro-improvement approach also reveals the fallacy of motivation-based change strategies. Most people wait until they feel motivated to begin improving, or they try to generate motivation through inspiration and excitement. But motivation is an unreliable emotion that fluctuates with circumstances, energy levels, and mood. Micro-improvements work regardless of motivation levels, because they're designed to be achievable even when motivation is low. This motivation independence is crucial for long-term success, because life inevitably includes periods of low motivation. You'll have days when you're tired, stressed, overwhelmed, or discouraged. Traditional improvement approaches collapse during these periods because they require high levels of motivation to sustain. But micro-improvements are designed to survive motivational valleys. You can read 1 page when you're exhausted. You can do 5 push-ups when you're stressed. You can practice 1 minute of meditation when you're overwhelmed. This resilience during difficult periods is what allows micro-improvements to compound over time. Most improvement efforts are interrupted by life's inevitable challenges, which breaks momentum and often leads to complete abandonment of the goal. But micro-improvements create what researchers call behavioral durability, the ability to maintain beneficial behaviors even under adverse conditions. The psychological impact of this durability cannot be overstated. When you prove to yourself that you can maintain improvement even during difficult times, you develop what psychologists call stress inoculation. You become more confident in your ability to handle challenges because you have evidence that your positive behaviors can survive stress. This creates a virtuous cycle. As you become more resilient, you experience less stress from life's challenges, which makes it easier to maintain your improvements, which increases your resilience further. But perhaps the most profound aspect of micro-improvements is how they change your identity at a cellular level. Patterns of thoughts and actions repeated many times create a neurosignature, or a brain groove, a series of interconnected neurons that carry the thought patterns of a particular habit. When you practice micro-improvements consistently, you're literally rewiring your brain to expect and create improvement. This neurological rewiring is why micro-improvements become self-reinforcing over time. As your brain adapts to the pattern of daily improvement, it begins to feel strange and uncomfortable when you don't improve. The same neurological mechanisms that once resisted change begin to resist stagnation. You develop what could be called improvement addiction, a healthy psychological dependency on growth and progress. This transformation from resistance to addiction is the ultimate goal of the micro-improvement approach. You want to reach a point where improving feels easier than not improving, where growth feels more natural than stagnation, where progress feels like a basic need rather than an optional pursuit. And this transformation happens not through dramatic changes or intense efforts, but through the quiet, consistent application of small improvements that gradually reshape your brain, your habits, and your identity. The science is clear. Micro-improvements are not just easier than macro changes, they're more effective. They create lasting change more reliably, survive challenges more consistently, and compound more powerfully over time. They work with your brain's natural patterns rather than against them. They build genuine confidence rather than temporary motivation. And they create the kind of sustainable improvement that transforms not just what you do, but who you are. This is why the daily improvement approach is so revolutionary. It's not asking you to become someone extraordinary overnight. It's asking you to become someone slightly better today than you were yesterday. And if you can do that consistently, if you can commit to the power of micro-improvements, you'll discover that extraordinary results are not just possible, but inevitable. Chapter 7. Building your improvement operating system. Creating sustainable daily improvement requires more than good intentions and sporadic motivation. It requires what successful improvers call an operating system, a comprehensive framework of strategies, structures, and supports that make improvement inevitable rather than optional. This operating system functions like the underlying software that runs a computer, largely invisible, constantly active, and absolutely essential for everything else to work properly. The foundation of any improvement operating system is environmental design. Your environment shapes your behavior far more powerfully than your willpower ever could. If you want to drink more water, the solution isn't to remind yourself to drink water. The solution is to fill a large water bottle and place it where you can't miss it. If you want to exercise more, the solution isn't to motivate yourself each morning. The solution is to lay out your workout clothes the night before. If you want to read more, the solution isn't to set reading goals. The solution is to keep a book on your pillow. Environmental design works because it reduces what psychologists call decision fatigue. Every choice you make throughout the day depletes your mental energy slightly. By evening, your capacity for good decisions is significantly diminished. This is why you might eat well all day, but struggle with late-night snacking, or why you might be productive in the morning, but procrastinate in the afternoon. Your willpower is finite, but your environment never gets tired. Make sure that your environment assists you in achieving your goals instead of holding you back. Research suggests that to make a goal a habit, it can help to remove reminders of old habits from your environment and replace them with cues of the habit you are trying to form. This might mean clearing out the pantry and throwing away junk food, asking your spouse to join you in your routine changes, or creating an exercise space in your home. The most successful improvers don't try to overcome their environment, They engineer it. They create what researchers call choice architecture, structuring their surroundings so that good choices are easy and bad choices are difficult. They understand that discipline is not about willpower, it's about design. Consider the simple act of checking your phone less frequently. Most people try to solve this through self-control. They tell themselves they should check their phone less. They set mental rules about phone usage. They rely on willpower to resist the urge. But this approach inevitably fails because it requires constant decision-making. Every time your phone buzzes, you have to decide whether to check it. Every time you're bored, you have to choose not to reach for it. Every notification becomes a test of your discipline. The environmental design approach is far more effective. You charge your phone in another room overnight. You delete social media apps and only access them through a web browser. You turn off all non-essential notifications. You create physical barriers that make checking your phone slightly more difficult. You're not relying on willpower, you're engineering choices. This principle applies to every area of improvement. Want to eat healthier? Don't stock junk food in your house. Want to save money? Set up automatic transfers to savings accounts. Want to learn a new skill? Schedule practice time in your calendar like any other appointment. Want to exercise more? Join a gym that's on your way to work rather than across town. You're not trying to change your desires, you're changing the architecture of your choices. But environmental design is only the first component of an effective improvement operating system. The second component is what researchers call implementation intentions, specific plans that link situational cues to desired behaviors. Instead of saying, "I will exercise more," you say, "I will go to the gym immediately after dropping my kids off at school on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday." Instead of saying, "I will eat healthier," you say, "I will eat a salad for lunch every day at my desk." Instead of saying, "I will learn Spanish," you say, "I will practice Spanish for 10 minutes every morning while drinking my coffee." Implementation intentions work because they eliminate the need for decision-making in the moment. Your brain doesn't have to figure out when to exercise, what to eat, or how to practice. Those decisions have already been made. You've pre-committed to specific actions in specific contexts, which dramatically increases the likelihood that you'll follow through. The power of implementation intentions lies in their specificity. Vague intentions like "I will work out more" require your brain to answer multiple questions. When, where, for how long, what kind of workout, which muscles, what equipment? Each question creates an opportunity for procrastination, distraction, or decision-making paralysis. But specific intentions like "I will do a 20-minute bodyweight workout in my living room at 6:30 a.m. on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday" answer all these questions in advance. The third component of an effective improvement operating system is habit stacking, the practice of linking new habits to existing ones. This approach leverages the neural pathways you've already established rather than trying to create entirely new ones. After you pour your morning coffee, you stack the habit of writing down something you are grateful for. After you take off your work shoes, you immediately put on your workout clothes. After you brush your teeth before bed, you read one page of a book. Habit stacking works because it uses the momentum of existing behaviors to power new ones. Your brain already has strong neural pathways for your morning coffee routine, coming home from work, and brushing your teeth. By linking new behaviors to these established patterns, you're essentially borrowing the strength of old habits to build new ones. The key to effective habit stacking is choosing trigger habits that are extremely consistent. If you sometimes skip breakfast, don't stack a new habit on eating breakfast. If you sometimes work late, don't stack a new habit on coming home at a specific time. Choose anchors that happen every single day without exception and that are already deeply ingrained in your routine. The fourth component of an improvement operating system is tracking and measurement. What gets measured gets managed, and what gets tracked gets improved. But effective tracking is not about complicated systems or extensive data collection. It's about creating simple, visual feedback that reinforces your desired identity. Tracking your progress can make improvements and celebrate success. This visibility serves multiple psychological functions. It provides immediate feedback on your consistency, creates a sense of momentum as you see your streak building, and activates your brain's reward systems through the satisfaction of marking something complete. The most effective tracking systems are visual and simple. A habit tracker app, where you check off daily behaviors. A calendar, where you put an X on days when you complete your workout. A jar, where you add a coin each time you practice a skill. The specific method matters less than the consistency of tracking and the immediate visual feedback it provides. But tracking serves an even deeper purpose than motivation. It provides data for optimization. When you track consistently, you begin to see patterns in your behavior that would otherwise be invisible. You notice that you're more likely to exercise on days when you sleep well. You observe that you read more on weeks when you're less stressed at work. You recognize that you practice music more consistently when you do it in the morning rather than the evening. This data allows you to optimize your improvement operating system continuously. You're not just building habits, you're building a system that learns about itself and improves over time. You become a scientist studying your own behavior, constantly experimenting with small adjustments that make success more likely. The fifth component of an effective improvement operating system is what researchers call social architecture, structuring your relationships and community to support your growth. The people around you have an enormous influence on your behavior, often in ways you don't consciously recognize. If your friends prioritize health and fitness, you're more likely to prioritize health and fitness. If your colleagues value continuous learning, you're more likely to invest in skill development. If your family supports your goals, you're more likely to achieve them. This influence is so powerful that research shows you can predict someone's weight, income, and happiness levels with surprising accuracy by looking at their 5 closest relationships. Your social environment shapes your behavior through both explicit pressure and subtle modeling. When everyone around you demonstrates certain behaviors, those behaviors begin to feel normal and expected rather than unusual and difficult. Building supportive social architecture might involve finding workout partners who share your fitness goals, joining professional communities focused on skill development, or simply being more intentional about spending time with people who inspire and challenge you. It might mean having honest conversations with friends and family about your goals and asking for their support. It might mean limiting time with people whose habits and attitudes undermine your growth. The final component of an improvement operating system is what could be called failure protocols, predetermined strategies for getting back on track when you inevitably fall short of your intentions. Every improvement journey includes setbacks, missed days, and periods of regression. The difference between people who improve consistently and people who improve sporadically is not that one group never fails, it's that one group has systems for recovering quickly from failure. Effective failure protocols are based on the principle that consistency matters more than perfection. Missing one workout is a mistake. Missing 2 workouts is a pattern. Missing 3 workouts is a crisis that requires immediate intervention. Failure protocols kick in at the mistake stage, before patterns and crises develop. A simple failure protocol might be, if I miss my planned workout, I will do at least 5 push-ups before bed that day. This maintains the habit structure even when the full behavior isn't possible. Another protocol might be, if I skip reading for 2 days in a row, I will read for just 2 minutes on the 3rd day. The goal is not to make up for lost time, it's to prevent momentum from completely stopping. These protocols work because they acknowledge that setbacks are normal, while preventing them from becoming catastrophic. They maintain your identity as someone who exercises, reads, or practices even when life interferes with your ideal schedule. They keep you in the game rather than allowing temporary failures to become permanent abandonment of your goals. When all these components work together, environmental design, implementation intentions, habit stacking, tracking systems, social architecture, and failure protocols, they create what feels like an unstoppable force for improvement. Good choices become easier, bad choices become harder. Progress feels inevitable, rather than dependent on daily motivation. But perhaps most importantly, an effective improvement operating system changes your relationship with change itself. Instead of improvement feeling like something you have to force yourself to do, it becomes something that happens naturally as a result of the systems you've built. Instead of relying on willpower and motivation, you rely on structure and design. Instead of hoping you'll find the energy to improve, you create conditions that make improvement the path of least resistance. This shift from force to flow is the ultimate goal of building an improvement operating system. You want to reach a point where growing feels easier than stagnating, where progress feels more natural than staying the same, where improvement happens not because you're disciplined, but because you're systematic. Chapter 8. The dark side of perfectionism. Perfectionism masquerades as high standards, but it's actually the enemy of improvement. While healthy striving propels you forward, perfectionism paralyzes you with impossible standards and all-or-nothing thinking. Understanding this distinction is crucial because the very trait that seems like it would accelerate improvement often becomes the biggest obstacle to meaningful progress. Research shows that perfectionism hampers success. In fact, it's often the path to depression, anxiety, addiction, and life paralysis. This isn't an exaggeration or therapeutic hyperbole, it's the consistent finding of psychological research over decades. Perfectionists are more likely to procrastinate, more prone to anxiety disorders, more susceptible to eating disorders, and paradoxically, less likely to achieve their goals than people with realistic standards. The fundamental problem with perfectionism is that it makes improvement conditional rather than continuous. A perfectionist thinks, I'll start exercising when I can commit to working out an hour every day. I'll begin that project when I have time to do it properly. I'll start learning piano when I can practice for at least 30 minutes daily. This conditional approach to improvement means that any progress depends on ideal circumstances, which rarely exist for sustained periods. Healthy strivers, in contrast, embrace what researchers call progress over perfection. They think, I'll exercise for whatever time I have available today. I'll work on that project for 15 minutes right now. I'll play piano for 5 minutes between other commitments. This unconditional approach to improvement means that progress can happen, regardless of circumstances. The difference between these two approaches compounds dramatically over time. The perfectionist waits for ideal conditions that rarely come, making sporadic progress during brief periods when everything aligns perfectly. The healthy striver makes consistent progress regardless of conditions, accumulating improvements steadily over months and years. Consistency trumps intensity every single time. Perfectionism is essentially fear disguised as high standards. The perfectionist brain says, if I can't do this perfectly, people will judge me. If I make mistakes, it means I'm incompetent. If my performance isn't flawless, I should quit rather than look foolish. These fears create a psychological trap where the desire to avoid failure becomes stronger than the desire to achieve success. This fear-based approach to improvement creates what psychologists call approach avoidance conflict. Part of you wants to improve and grow, but part of you wants to avoid the risk of failure and judgment. When these motivations conflict, avoidance usually wins because the pain of potential failure feels more immediate than the pleasure of potential success. So you avoid starting rather than risk not being perfect. But perfectionism doesn't just prevent you from starting, it sabotages you when you're making progress. Perfectionists have a tendency to abandon efforts the moment they fall short of their impossible standards. They eat perfectly for 2 weeks, have one bad meal, and conclude their diet is ruined. They exercise consistently for a month, miss 2 workouts due to illness, and decide they're not really athletic people. They practice a skill diligently for months, struggle with a difficult technique, and convince themselves they lack natural talent. This all-or-nothing thinking is particularly destructive because it treats normal setbacks as catastrophic failures. In reality, setbacks are not just inevitable, they're essential for learning and growth. Every person who has ever achieved mastery in any domain has experienced countless failures, mistakes, and periods of regression. The difference between those who ultimately succeed and those who quit is not the absence of failure, it's the interpretation of failure. Perfectionists interpret failure as evidence of inadequacy. I failed because I'm not good enough. Healthy strivers interpret failure as information. I failed because I need to adjust my approach. This difference in interpretation creates dramatically different emotional and behavioral responses to setbacks. Perfectionists become discouraged and quit. Healthy strivers become curious and adapt. The perfectionist's fear of failure also creates what researchers call self-handicapping behaviors. Unconscious strategies that provide excuses for potential poor performance, procrastinating until the last minute, not preparing thoroughly, or choosing unrealistically difficult goals, all serve the same psychological function. They protect the ego by providing alternative explanations for failure. If you procrastinate and perform poorly, you can tell yourself that you would have succeeded if you had more time. If you don't prepare thoroughly and struggle, you can blame inadequate preparation rather than inadequate ability. If you set impossible goals and fail to reach them, you can maintain the fantasy that you could have succeeded with more reasonable expectations. Self-handicapping preserves the perfectionist's self-image at the cost of actual performance and growth. But perhaps the most insidious aspect of perfectionism is how it masquerades as virtue. Perfectionists often take pride in their high standards and view their approach as morally superior to those who accept good enough. They see themselves as dedicated, serious, and uncompromising in their pursuit of excellence. This moral framing makes perfectionism incredibly difficult to change, because it requires admitting that what feels like a strength is actually a weakness. The truth is that perfectionism is not about excellence, it's about control. The perfectionist is trying to control outcomes, perceptions, and judgments in a world where none of these things can be fully controlled. This attempt at control creates constant anxiety because the perfectionist is perpetually worried about variables outside their influence. Will people approve? Will the results be good enough? Will mistakes be noticed and judged? Healthy striving, in contrast, focuses on process rather than outcomes. Healthy strivers ask, what can I control in this situation? What would be a reasonable goal given my current circumstances? What would progress look like, even if it's not perfect? This process-focused approach reduces anxiety because it concentrates attention on factors within your control rather than variables you cannot influence. Overcoming perfectionism requires a fundamental shift from external validation to internal satisfaction. Perfectionists derive their sense of worth from external metrics, grades, awards, compliments, achievements, and recognition. This external focus makes them perpetually vulnerable to disappointment because external validation is unpredictable and often independent of actual performance quality. The alternative is to develop what psychologists call internal locus of evaluation, the ability to assess your own performance and progress independent of external feedback. This doesn't mean ignoring feedback or becoming arrogant about your abilities. It means developing confidence in your own judgment and finding satisfaction in the process of growth, rather than just the outcomes of effort. Shifting from external to internal validation requires practical strategies for redefining success. Instead of "I succeeded because I got an A," you think "I succeeded because I learned something new." Instead of "I failed because people didn't like my presentation," you think "I succeeded because I faced my fear of public speaking." Instead of "I'm not good at this because I made mistakes," you think "I'm learning because I'm willing to make mistakes." This reframing transforms mistakes from evidence of inadequacy into evidence of courage. It transforms setbacks from reasons to quit into information for improvement. It transforms the entire improvement process from a series of pass-fail tests into a continuous learning experience. Another crucial strategy for overcoming perfectionism is what researchers call exposure therapy for imperfection. This involves deliberately doing things imperfectly in low-stakes situations to prove to yourself that imperfection is not catastrophic. Send an email with a minor typo. Submit work that's good enough rather than perfect. Share an opinion without researching it exhaustively. Ask a question that might seem obvious. These small acts of imperfection serve two important functions. They desensitize you to the anxiety of not being perfect, and they provide evidence that imperfection rarely has the catastrophic consequences that perfectionism predicts. Most people don't notice minor mistakes. Those who do notice rarely care as much as you imagine. And even when imperfection is noticed and judged, the actual consequences are usually far milder than the perfectionist's anxiety anticipates. The goal is not to become careless or lazy. It's to become appropriately calibrated about the relationship between effort and outcomes. Sometimes 80% effort produces 95% results. Sometimes perfect preparation leads to disappointing performance due to factors beyond your control. Sometimes good enough is actually more than good enough. Learning to recognize when good enough is sufficient is a crucial skill for sustained improvement. Perfectionism demands maximum effort in all situations, which is not only exhausting but strategically misguided. Energy and attention are finite resources that should be allocated wisely. It makes sense to strive for excellence in areas that matter most to you, while accepting good enough in areas that are less central to your goals. This strategic approach to effort is what distinguishes high achievers from perfectionists. High achievers are perfectionistic about a small number of things that matter deeply to them. Perfectionists are perfectionistic about everything, which dilutes their energy and prevents them from achieving true excellence in any domain. The transformation from perfectionism to healthy striving is not about lowering your standards. It's about changing your relationship with standards. Instead of using standards as weapons against yourself, you use them as tools for growth. Instead of seeing standards as fixed requirements you must meet to be worthy, you see them as dynamic targets that guide your efforts. Instead of being devastated when you fall short of standards, you become curious about how to improve your approach. This healthier relationship with standards makes improvement sustainable because it removes the emotional volatility that perfectionism creates. You can maintain consistent effort over time because your sense of worth isn't fluctuating based on daily performance. You can recover quickly from setbacks because they don't threaten your fundamental self-concept. You can enjoy the process of growth because it's no longer contaminated by the fear of not being perfect. Ultimately, overcoming perfectionism is about embracing your humanity rather than trying to transcend it. Humans are imperfect by design. We learn through trial and error. We grow through making mistakes and correcting them. We develop wisdom through experiencing both success and failure. Perfectionism is essentially a rejection of these fundamental aspects of human experience. When you embrace imperfection as not just acceptable but essential for growth, everything changes. Mistakes become data rather than disasters. Setbacks become redirections rather than rejections. The entire improvement process becomes more enjoyable, sustainable, and ultimately more effective. Because paradoxically, when you stop demanding perfection from yourself, you often achieve levels of excellence that perfectionism never could have produced. Chapter 9. Systems Thinking for Personal Development. Most people approach improvement with what could be called event thinking. They focus on specific outcomes they want to achieve rather than the systems that produce outcomes. They want to lose weight rather than developing a system for healthy living. They want to learn a new skill rather than creating a system for continuous learning. They want to be more successful rather than building systems that generate success. This event-focused approach is why most improvement efforts fail. They target symptoms rather than causes. Systems thinking approaches improvement differently. Instead of asking, "What do I want to achieve?" systems thinking asks, "What kind of system would automatically produce the results I want?" Instead of focusing on the destination, systems thinking focuses on the vehicle. Instead of optimizing for outcomes, systems thinking optimizes for processes. This distinction is crucial because outcomes are often outside your direct control, but systems are always within your influence. You can't directly control whether you lose 20 pounds, but you can control the eating and exercise systems that influence weight loss. You can't directly control whether you get promoted, but you can control the skill development and networking systems that influence career advancement. You can't directly control whether you achieve your goals, but you can control the daily systems that make goal achievement more likely. When you focus on systems rather than outcomes, you solve problems at their source rather than treating their manifestations. If you're struggling with weight, the problem is rarely willpower or motivation. It's usually systemic. Your food environment makes healthy eating difficult. Your schedule makes regular exercise challenging. Your stress levels trigger emotional eating. Your social circle normalizes unhealthy habits. Addressing these systemic issues is far more effective than trying to override them through willpower. Think about a thermostat as a perfect example of effective systems thinking. A thermostat doesn't work harder when the room is cold. It has a system for maintaining the desired temperature automatically. When the temperature drops below the set point, the heating system activates. When the temperature rises above the set point, the heating system deactivates. The system responds to feedback and self-corrects without requiring constant attention or effort. Effective personal improvement systems work similarly. They include feedback mechanisms that detect when you're off track, automatic corrections that get you back on course, and buffers that prevent small deviations from becoming major setbacks. They respond to changing circumstances without requiring constant recalibration. They maintain desired outcomes with minimal ongoing effort once they're properly designed and implemented. Building effective improvement systems requires understanding what researchers call leverage points, places within a complex system where a small shift in one thing can produce big changes in everything. In personal improvement, the highest leverage points are usually habits, environment, and identity, not goals, motivation, or willpower. Habits are high leverage because they automate beneficial behaviors. Once a habit is established, it continues to produce benefits without requiring ongoing decision-making or energy. A person with strong exercise habits doesn't have to motivate themselves to work out each day. The behavior happens automatically as part of their routine. A person with strong reading habits doesn't have to decide whether to read. They simply read because that's what they do. Environment is high leverage because it shapes behavior unconsciously. When healthy foods are visible and convenient, you eat more healthy foods. When distractions are removed from your workspace, you become more productive. When exercise equipment is accessible, you exercise more frequently. Environmental changes require effort to implement, but once implemented, they influence behavior continuously without requiring ongoing willpower. Identity is high leverage because it drives behavior at an unconscious level. When you see yourself as a healthy person, you naturally make choices that maintain that identity. When you see yourself as a learner, you naturally seek opportunities to acquire new knowledge and skills. When you see yourself as someone who follows through on commitments, you naturally complete what you start. Identity-based changes feel effortless once they're integrated, because they align behavior with self-concept. The most powerful improvement systems target all three leverage points simultaneously. They build beneficial habits that align with a desired identity in an environment that supports both. A person who wants to become more physically fit might develop a habit of morning exercise, create a home gym space, and begin thinking of themselves as an athlete. Each element reinforces the others, creating a robust system that's resistant to disruption. But effective systems thinking also requires understanding what researchers call system delays, the gap between when you implement a change and when you see results. Most improvement systems have significant delays between inputs and outputs. You might exercise consistently for weeks before seeing physical changes. You might practice a skill for months before achieving competence. You might implement better business processes for quarters before seeing financial improvements. These delays are one of the primary reasons people abandon improvement systems prematurely. They implement a system, don't see immediate results, and conclude the system isn't working. But system delays are normal and predictable, not indicators of system failure. Understanding and preparing for delays prevents premature abandonment of effective systems. The key to working with system delays is focusing on leading indicators rather than lagging indicators. Lagging indicators are the ultimate outcomes you want to achieve: weight loss, skill mastery, financial success. Leading indicators are the behaviors and metrics that predict those outcomes: workout frequency, practice consistency, savings rate. Leading indicators give you feedback much more quickly than lagging indicators, allowing you to adjust your system while maintaining motivation. Another crucial aspect of systems thinking is understanding feedback loops, the mechanisms by which systems self-correct and improve over time. Positive feedback loops amplify behavior in the direction it's already going. Negative feedback loops counteract changes and maintain stability. Effective improvement systems include both types of feedback loops, strategically designed to support desired outcomes. For example, a well-designed exercise system might include positive feedback loops that make exercise more rewarding over time, tracking workouts to visualize progress, exercising with friends to add social rewards, choosing activities you enjoy to increase intrinsic motivation. It might also include negative feedback loops that discourage skipping workouts, scheduling exercise at times when you have high energy, preparing workout clothes in advance to reduce friction, creating accountability partnerships that make skipping exercise socially uncomfortable. Systems thinking also recognizes that sustainable improvement requires what engineers call redundancy, multiple pathways to achieve the same outcome. If your improvement depends on a single habit, schedule, environment, or strategy, it becomes fragile. Any disruption to that single element can derail your entire improvement effort. But if you build multiple pathways to the same outcome, your system becomes robust and adaptable. A robust learning system, for instance, might include multiple ways to acquire new knowledge: reading books during commute time, listening to podcasts during exercise, watching educational videos during lunch breaks, taking online courses in the evening, and discussing ideas with knowledgeable friends. If any single pathway becomes unavailable, the learning continues through alternative channels. This redundancy principle applies to motivation as well. Sustainable improvement systems don't depend solely on motivation. They include multiple drivers of behavior. Habit reduces the need for motivation. Environmental design makes good choices easier, regardless of motivation levels. Social accountability provides external motivation when internal motivation is low. Identity alignment makes certain behaviors feel natural rather than effortful. Progress tracking provides feedback that maintains motivation over time. The goal is to create what systems theorists call anti-fragility, the property of becoming stronger under stress rather than weaker. Anti-fragile improvement systems don't just survive disruptions. They use disruptions as opportunities to become more robust and effective. Travel disrupts your exercise routine, so you develop bodyweight exercises that can be done anywhere. Work stress disrupts your evening learning routine, so you develop micro-learning habits that fit into small time windows. Relationship changes disrupt your social accountability, so you develop self-accountability practices that don't depend on others. Building anti-fragile improvement systems requires thinking like a scientist rather than like a perfectionist. Scientists expect experiments to fail, learn from failures, and adjust their approach based on results. Perfectionists expect plans to work perfectly, become discouraged by failures, and often abandon approaches after minor setbacks. The scientific approach to improvement involves running small experiments continuously. Try a new habit for 2 weeks and evaluate its effectiveness. Adjust your environment in small ways and observe the impact on behavior. Test different motivational strategies and measure their sustainability. Use these experiments to refine your system gradually, making it more effective and more resilient over time. This experimental mindset is particularly important because improvement systems need to be personalized. What works for other people provides useful starting points, but your optimal system will be unique to your circumstances, preferences, personality, and goals. The only way to discover your optimal system is through experimentation, measurement, and iteration. The transformation from event thinking to systems thinking is profound because it changes your entire relationship with improvement. Instead of feeling frustrated when you don't see immediate results, you become fascinated by the process of system optimization. Instead of abandoning efforts when circumstances change, you become skilled at adapting systems to new conditions. Instead of depending on motivation and willpower, you become confident in your ability to design environments and routines that produce desired outcomes automatically. This systems approach makes improvement feel less like work and more like engineering. You're not forcing yourself to change through effort and discipline. You're designing conditions that make change inevitable. You're not hoping that this time will be different. You're systematically removing the factors that made previous attempts fail, while strengthening the factors that support success. Most importantly, systems thinking makes improvement sustainable, because it aligns with how change actually works in complex systems like human behavior. Real change happens gradually, through the accumulation of small modifications that compound over time. It happens through feedback and iteration, not through perfect initial plans. It happens through designing supportive conditions, not through heroic individual effort. When you understand these principles and build improvement systems accordingly, you discover something remarkable. Lasting change becomes not just possible but predictable. You stop hoping for transformation and start engineering it. You stop depending on motivation and start depending on systems. You stop fighting against your nature and start designing with it. And in the process, improvement stops being something you do occasionally and becomes something you are continuously. Chapter 10. The Neuroscience of Motivation and Willpower. The traditional approach to improvement places enormous faith in two psychological concepts that neuroscience reveals to be far less reliable than most people believe: motivation and willpower. The conventional wisdom suggests that if you want to change, you need to get motivated and then use your willpower to maintain that motivation until new behaviors become automatic. But brain science shows us that this approach is not just ineffective, it's fundamentally misaligned with how the human brain actually works. Understanding the neuroscience of motivation and willpower is crucial because it explains why most improvement efforts fail and reveals more effective approaches that work with your brain's natural patterns. rather than against them. When you understand how these systems really function, you can design improvement strategies that succeed not because they require superhuman discipline, but because they harness the brain's existing mechanisms in intelligent ways. Let's start with motivation. Most people think of motivation as a feeling that either exists or doesn't exist, something you either have or you don't have. But neuroscience reveals that motivation is actually a complex neurochemical process involving multiple brain regions and neurotransmitter systems. The primary driver of motivation is dopamine, often mischaracterized as the pleasure chemical, but more accurately described as the anticipation chemical. Dopamine doesn't make you feel good when you achieve something. It makes you want to pursue something. It's released not when you reach your goal, but when you anticipate reaching your goal. This distinction is crucial because it explains why motivation feels strongest at the beginning of an improvement effort when the goal feels exciting and achievable, and why it fades as the reality of daily effort sets in. The dopamine system evolved to motivate behaviors that were essential for survival. Finding food, securing shelter, attracting mates. These behaviors provided immediate, tangible rewards that clearly linked effort to benefit. Modern improvement goals, however, often provide delayed, abstract rewards that don't trigger the same neurological response. Exercising today doesn't provide immediate health benefits. Studying today doesn't provide immediate career advancement. Saving money today doesn't provide immediate financial security. This mismatch between ancient motivational systems and modern improvement challenges explains why motivation feels unreliable for sustaining long-term change. Your brain is designed to prioritize immediate, concrete rewards over delayed, abstract benefits. This isn't a character flaw, it's neurobiology. Understanding this allows you to design improvement strategies that provide more immediate and concrete rewards for beneficial behaviors. One of the most effective strategies is what researchers call temptation bundling, linking behaviors you should do with behaviors you want to do. You only listen to your favorite podcast while exercising. You only watch your favorite TV show while doing household chores. You only go to your favorite coffee shop while working on important projects. This approach leverages your brain's existing dopamine responses to motivate beneficial behaviors. Another effective approach is creating what neuroscientists call micro-rewards, small, immediate benefits that reinforce positive behaviors. Check off completed tasks on a visible list. Take a satisfying photo after organizing a space. Allow yourself a small treat after completing a difficult task. These micro-rewards trigger dopamine release and strengthen the neural pathways associated with beneficial behaviors. But perhaps the most important insight from motivation neuroscience is that waiting for motivation is backwards. Most people think, I'll start when I feel motivated. But the brain science shows, I'll feel motivated when I start. Motivation often follows action rather than preceding it. Taking even small actions toward a goal triggers dopamine release, which creates motivation to continue. This is why the 2-minute rule is so effective. Starting with tiny actions creates the neurochemical foundation for sustained effort. Now let's examine willpower, which neuroscience reveals to be even more limited than most people realize. Willpower is controlled by the prefrontal cortex, the brain region responsible for executive functions like decision-making, impulse control, and long-term planning. This region is incredibly powerful, but also incredibly energy-intensive. It consumes about 20% of your total glucose metabolism, despite representing only 4% of your brain mass. This high energy requirement means that willpower is a finite resource that depletes throughout the day. Every decision you make, every impulse you resist, every choice you deliberate, draws from the same pool of mental energy. This is why you might eat well all day, but struggle with snacking in the evening, or why you might be productive in the morning but procrastinate in the afternoon. Your willpower isn't weak, it's tired. Research consistently shows that willpower functions like a muscle. It can be strengthened through exercise, but it also becomes fatigued through use and needs time to recover. This explains why improvement strategies that rely heavily on willpower are unsustainable. They demand constant use of a limited resource without providing adequate recovery time. The solution is not to strengthen your willpower, it's to reduce your dependence on willpower. The most effective improvement strategies minimize the need for moment-to-moment decision-making and impulse control. They achieve this through environmental design, habit formation, and automatic systems that produce beneficial behaviors without requiring conscious effort. For example, if you want to eat healthier, the willpower approach would involve resisting temptation every time you encounter unhealthy food. This requires constant decision-making and impulse control throughout the day. The low willpower approach involves removing unhealthy food from your environment, pre-planning healthy meals, and creating systems that make good choices easier than bad choices. The behavior becomes automatic rather than effortful. The neuroscience of habit formation reveals why this automatic approach is so much more effective than willpower-based approaches. Habits are controlled by a different brain region called the basal ganglia, which operates below the level of conscious awareness. Once behaviors become habitual, they require no willpower, no decision-making, and no conscious effort. They simply happen automatically in response to environmental cues. This is why successful improvers focus on building strong habits rather than relying on strong willpower. Habits are neurologically efficient. They free up mental energy for other tasks, while maintaining beneficial behaviors consistently. A person with strong exercise habits doesn't use willpower to work out. They simply work out because that's what their brain is programmed to do in certain contexts. But habit formation requires patience, because it involves physical changes in brain structure. When you repeat a behavior consistently, your brain begins to myelinate the neural pathways associated with that behavior. Myelin is a fatty substance that surrounds neurons and dramatically increases the speed of neural transmission. Myelinated pathways become the brain's preferred routes, making associated behaviors feel more natural and automatic. This myelination process takes time, typically 66 days on average for simple behaviors, longer for complex ones. During this formation period, new habits feel effortful because they're using unmyelinated pathways that transmit signals slowly. But once myelination occurs, habits feel effortless because they're using the brain's superhighways rather than its backroads. Understanding this timeline helps explain why most people give up on new habits prematurely. They experience the effortful formation period, but quit before reaching the automatic maintenance period. They interpret the initial effort as evidence that the habit isn't working or isn't for them, not realizing that effort is temporary while automaticity is permanent. The neuroscience also reveals why stress undermines improvement efforts so consistently. When you're stressed, your brain activates the sympathetic nervous system and floods your system with stress hormones like cortisol. These hormones shift brain activity away from the prefrontal cortex where willpower resides toward the limbic system where fight or flight responses are generated. This neurological shift makes you more impulsive, more emotional, and less capable of long-term thinking. This is why people often abandon their improvement efforts during stressful periods. It's not that they lack commitment or discipline, it's that stress temporarily impairs the brain regions responsible for self-control and long-term planning. Understanding this allows you to prepare for stressful periods by strengthening your habits and systems before stress hits, rather than relying on willpower during stress. The most sophisticated insight from neuroscience is that sustainable improvement happens when you align your improvement strategies with your brain's natural reward systems, rather than fighting against them. This involves understanding what neuroscientists call intrinsic versus extrinsic motivation. Intrinsic motivation comes from internal satisfaction, the pleasure of mastering a skill, the joy of physical movement, the satisfaction of helping others. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards, money, recognition, approval, avoiding punishment. Research consistently shows that intrinsic motivation is more sustainable than extrinsic motivation because it activates different neural networks. Intrinsically motivated behaviors engage the brain's default mode network, creating a sense of flow and effortless engagement. Extrinsically motivated behaviors require more conscious effort and are more vulnerable to motivational depletion. This means that the most sustainable improvement strategies help you discover the intrinsic rewards within beneficial behaviors, rather than relying solely on external consequences. Instead of exercising to lose weight, you learn to appreciate how movement makes you feel energized and strong. Intrinsic. Instead of learning skills to advance your career, extrinsic, you cultivate curiosity about the subject matter itself. Intrinsic. Developing intrinsic motivation requires patience and experimentation. You might need to try different types of exercise before finding one that feels inherently rewarding. You might need to explore various approaches to a skill before discovering one that sparks genuine interest. You might need to connect with the deeper purpose behind a goal before the daily actions feel meaningful. But once you tap into intrinsic motivation, improvement becomes sustainable in ways that willpower-based approaches never could achieve. You're no longer fighting against your brain's natural tendencies. You're channeling them toward beneficial outcomes. You're no longer depleting your mental energy through constant self-control. You're engaging in activities that naturally restore and energize you. This neurological approach to improvement is revolutionary because it changes the entire experience of personal development. Instead of improvement feeling like discipline, it begins to feel like flow. Instead of change requiring sacrifice, it starts to feel like alignment. Instead of growth demanding willpower, it becomes a natural expression of who you are and how your brain is designed to function. The ultimate goal is to reach what neuroscientists call optimal experience, states where your brain is functioning at its highest level, while requiring minimal conscious effort. These are the moments when learning feels effortless, when physical activity feels energizing rather than exhausting, when challenges feel engaging rather than overwhelming. These states aren't accidents, they're the result of aligning improvement strategies with neuroscience rather than working against it. When you understand and apply the neuroscience of motivation and willpower, you discover that sustainable improvement isn't about becoming more disciplined, it's about becoming more intelligent in how you work with the brain you already have. You stop trying to override your neurobiology and start leveraging it. You stop fighting your brain and start partnering with it. And in the process, improvement stops feeling like work and starts feeling like the most natural thing in the world. Chapter 11. Environmental Engineering for Behavior Change. Your environment is constantly shaping your behavior, often in ways so subtle that you never notice the influence. Every object in your line of sight, every option available to you, every barrier between you and different choices is quietly voting on what you do next. Most people dramatically underestimate the power of environmental factors, while dramatically overestimating the power of personal willpower. This misunderstanding leads to improvement strategies that fight against environmental pressures instead of harnessing them. The science of environmental psychology reveals that context isn't just background to behavior, it's often the primary driver of behavior. Research shows that environmental factors can influence choices more powerfully than conscious intentions, personal values, or even strong preferences. A person might strongly prefer healthy food, but consistently choose junk food when healthy options are difficult to access, and processed foods are conveniently placed. They might value learning, but rarely read when books are stored in another room, while the television is prominently displayed in their living space. This environmental influence operates largely below the threshold of conscious awareness. You don't usually notice that you eat more when food is visible on the counter, that you exercise more when your workout clothes are laid out, or that you check your phone more when it's within arm's reach. These environmental cues trigger automatic behavioral responses that bypass your deliberate decision-making processes. Understanding this automaticity is crucial for effective behavior change because it reveals why willpower-based approaches are so unreliable. When you rely on willpower, you're asking your conscious mind to override automatic responses triggered by environmental cues. This creates constant internal conflict that's both exhausting and unsustainable. Environmental engineering eliminates this conflict by changing the cues rather than fighting the responses. The most fundamental principle of environmental engineering is what researchers call choice architecture, deliberately designing your surroundings to make good choices easier and bad choices harder. This doesn't mean making bad choices impossible, which often triggers psychological reactance and makes forbidden options more appealing. It means adjusting the relative ease or difficulty of different options to bias behavior toward beneficial choices. Consider the simple goal of drinking more water. The willpower approach involves reminding yourself throughout the day to drink water, using mental discipline to choose water over other beverages, and fighting against the convenience of alternative options. This requires constant decision-making and depletes mental energy throughout the day. The environmental engineering approach involves filling a large water bottle and placing it where you can't miss it, removing alternative beverages from easy reach, adding natural flavoring to make water more appealing, and creating environmental cues that prompt water consumption. You might place a glass of water next to your coffee maker, so you drink water while your coffee brews. You might set hourly reminders on your phone to take a sip. You might use a water bottle with measurement markings to make progress visible throughout the day. These environmental changes make drinking water easier, while making the alternatives relatively more difficult. You're not using willpower to choose water, you're designing conditions where water consumption becomes the path of least resistance. This principle of reducing friction for beneficial behaviors while increasing friction for detrimental behaviors can be applied to virtually any improvement goal. Want to exercise more? Keep workout equipment visible and accessible while storing sedentary entertainment options out of sight. Want to eat healthier? Pre-cut vegetables and store them at eye level in your refrigerator, while keeping processed foods in hard-to-reach locations. Want to read more? Keep books in multiple locations throughout your home, while charging electronic devices in less accessible areas. The power of friction reduction becomes clear when you understand what psychologists call activation energy, the amount of effort required to initiate a behavior. High activation energy makes behaviors less likely to occur, while low activation energy makes them more likely. Many beneficial behaviors have naturally high activation energy. You have to change clothes to exercise, prepare ingredients to cook healthy meals, find quiet space to read or study. Environmental engineering reduces this activation energy through preparation and positioning. Preparing workout clothes the night before reduces the activation energy for morning exercise. Pre-cutting vegetables on weekends reduces the activation energy for healthy cooking during busy weekdays. Keeping books in every room reduces the activation energy for reading during brief free moments. These preparations require effort, but the effort is front-loaded rather than required every time you want to perform the behavior. This front-loading principle is particularly powerful because it leverages what researchers call planning mode versus doing mode. When you're in planning mode, you have mental energy, clear intentions, and long-term perspective. When you're in doing mode, you often have depleted mental energy, competing priorities, and short-term focus. Environmental engineering allows you to make decisions once during planning mode that automatically influence multiple future moments in doing mode. For example, you might spend 1 hour on Sunday preparing healthy meals for the week. This single hour of planning mode effort influences dozens of eating decisions throughout the week. Instead of deciding what to eat when you're hungry, tired, and stressed, you're simply heating up meals that your past self already prepared. The environmental preparation eliminates multiple decision points that could derail your nutrition goals. But environmental engineering isn't just about physical spaces. It also includes what could be called social architecture. The people around you create powerful environmental pressures that influence behavior often more strongly than physical cues. If your friends prioritize fitness, you're more likely to exercise regularly. If your colleagues value continuous learning, you're more likely to invest in skill development. If your family supports healthy eating, you're more likely to maintain nutritious habits. Research consistently shows that behavior is contagious within social networks. You can predict someone's weight, income level, happiness, and various habits with surprising accuracy by looking at their 5 closest relationships. This social influence operates through multiple mechanisms: direct peer pressure, normalization of certain behaviors, access to information and resources, and social accountability for personal choices. Building supportive social architecture might involve joining groups focused on your improvement goals, finding accountability partners who share similar aspirations, or simply being more intentional about spending time with people whose habits align with your desired changes. It might mean having honest conversations with friends and family about your goals and asking for specific support. It might mean limiting time with people whose habits consistently undermine your improvement efforts. The digital environment has become increasingly important as screens and devices occupy more of our daily attention. Your digital environment includes the apps on your phone, the websites you visit regularly, the content you consume, and the notifications that interrupt your attention throughout the day. Just as physical environment shapes physical behavior, digital environment shapes mental behavior. Optimizing your digital environment involves applying the same friction principles to virtual spaces. Remove social media apps from your phone's home screen to increase friction for mindless scrolling. Use website blockers during focused work time to reduce distractions. Curate your social media feeds to prioritize educational and inspiring content over entertainment and negativity. Set specific times for checking email and news, rather than allowing notifications to interrupt your attention randomly. The environmental engineering approach also recognizes that perfect environments are impossible to maintain consistently. Life involves travel, schedule changes, unexpected circumstances, and social obligations that disrupt optimal conditions. This is why robust environmental strategies include what could be called portability, elements of your optimal environment that can be maintained even when circumstances change. Portable environmental elements might include habits that don't depend on specific locations or equipment, digital tools that work on multiple devices, social relationships that provide support regardless of physical proximity, or mindset practices that create internal stability when external conditions fluctuate. The goal is to engineer environments that are both optimized for normal circumstances and resilient during disrupted circumstances. Advanced environmental engineering involves understanding what researchers call environmental triggers, specific cues that automatically initiate behavioral chains. A trigger might be placing your running shoes next to your bed, so putting them on automatically leads to getting dressed for exercise. It might be keeping a book next to your coffee maker, so your morning coffee routine automatically includes reading time. It might be setting a glass of water next to your vitamins, so taking supplements automatically includes hydration. These environmental triggers work because they leverage the brain's tendency to link behaviors that occur in close proximity. Once these linkages are established, the environmental cue automatically initiates the entire behavioral sequence without requiring conscious decision-making. You're essentially programming your environment to prompt beneficial behaviors automatically. The sophistication of environmental engineering increases as you begin to understand your personal patterns and preferences. Some people work better with minimalist environments that reduce distractions. Others work better with rich environments that provide stimulation and options. Some people need high structure and consistency. Others need flexibility and variety. Effective environmental design requires self-knowledge about what conditions support your best performance. This self-knowledge develops through experimentation and observation. Try working in different physical spaces and notice which environments enhance your focus and productivity. Experiment with different daily routines and observe which structures support consistency. Test various social arrangements and identify which relationships motivate your best efforts. Use these insights to continuously refine your environmental design. The ultimate goal of environmental engineering is to create what researchers call behavioral momentum, conditions where beneficial choices become so natural and automatic that they require minimal conscious effort to maintain. When your environment consistently prompts good decisions and supports beneficial behaviors, improvement stops feeling like work and starts feeling like the inevitable result of well-designed conditions. This environmental approach to improvement is powerful because it works with human nature rather than against it. Instead of trying to develop superhuman discipline, you develop superhuman conditions. Instead of fighting against environmental pressures, you engineer environmental pressures to work in your favor. Instead of depending on motivation and willpower, you depend on intelligent design and automatic systems. When you master environmental engineering, you discover that lasting change is less about changing yourself and more about changing your context. You stop trying to become someone who can resist temptation and start becoming someone who rarely encounters temptation. You stop trying to motivate yourself to make good choices and start creating conditions where good choices are the obvious choices. You stop fighting against your environment and start designing an environment that fights for your goals. This shift from personal change to environmental change is liberating because it removes the moral weight that often accompanies improvement efforts. You're not succeeding because you're more disciplined or failing because you're weak. You're succeeding because you're more disciplined or failing because you're weak. Understanding this removes shame and self-judgment from the improvement process, while providing clear direction for what to adjust when progress stalls. Instead of questioning your character, you question your systems. Instead of trying harder, you design better. Instead of relying on willpower, you rely on wisdom about how environments shape behavior and how to engineer environments that shape behavior in beneficial directions. Chapter 12. The Psychology of Momentum. Momentum is the hidden force that separates those who improve consistently from those who struggle with on and off progress. It's not just feeling motivated or being in a good streak. Momentum is a psychological state that makes improvement feel inevitable rather than effortful. Understanding how to build, maintain, and recover momentum is perhaps the most crucial skill in the arsenal of daily improvement. Most people misunderstand momentum completely. They think it's something that happens to them, like catching a wave or finding their groove. But psychological research reveals that momentum is something you create deliberately through specific patterns of thought and behavior. It's a learnable skill that can be developed, optimized, and recovered when lost. The foundation of momentum lies in what psychologists call self-efficacy, your belief in your ability to execute behaviors necessary to produce specific performance. This isn't general confidence or positive thinking. Self-efficacy is domain-specific confidence built through direct experience of success. Each small accomplishment strengthens your confidence and reduces your fear of failure. When you see yourself making progress, even in tiny steps, you believe in your ability to continue. But self-efficacy isn't built through wishful thinking or affirmations. It's built through what researchers call mastery experiences. Situations where you successfully complete challenging tasks through your own effort. These experiences provide undeniable evidence of your capabilities and create confidence that transfers to similar challenges. This is why starting with ridiculously small goals is so critical for building momentum. Each small success provides a mastery experience that strengthens your belief in your ability to improve. A person who successfully reads one page every day for a week has concrete evidence that they can maintain consistency. This evidence builds confidence for slightly larger challenges, creating an upward spiral of capability and belief. The progression must be carefully calibrated. Goals that are too easy don't provide meaningful mastery experiences because there's no real challenge to overcome. Goals that are too difficult create failure experiences that undermine confidence and break momentum. The optimal challenge level exists in what developmental psychologists call the zone of proximal development. Tasks that stretch your current abilities without exceeding them. This psychological sweet spot creates what researchers call optimal challenge. Experiences that are difficult enough to be engaging, but not so difficult as to be overwhelming. When you consistently operate in this zone, you experience what's known as flow states, periods of complete absorption and effortless concentration, where improvement feels enjoyable rather than effortful. Flow states are particularly important for momentum because they create positive emotional associations with improvement activities. Instead of improvement feeling like discipline or sacrifice, it begins to feel like play and engagement. This emotional shift is crucial because it transforms improvement from something you have to force yourself to do into something you genuinely want to do. But flow states require specific conditions that you must consciously create. You need clear goals that provide direction without being overwhelming. You need immediate feedback that tells you whether you're making progress. You need a balance between challenge and skill level that keeps you engaged without creating anxiety or boredom. And you need deep concentration that isn't interrupted by distractions or multitasking. The emotional dimension of momentum operates through what neuroscientists call the reward prediction system. When you're making consistent progress, your brain releases neurotransmitters associated with reward and satisfaction. This neurochemical response makes you want to continue the behaviors that created the progress. Your brain literally becomes addicted to improvement. However, this reward system can also work against momentum if not properly understood. When progress slows or becomes less visible, the emotional rewards diminish. Your brain begins to lose interest in the improvement activities because they're no longer providing the same neurochemical satisfaction. This is why many people lose momentum even when they're still making objective progress. Progress has become emotionally less rewarding. Managing this emotional dimension requires understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. Extrinsic motivation comes from external rewards like recognition, money, or social approval. Intrinsic motivation comes from internal satisfaction like mastery, autonomy, and purpose. While extrinsic rewards can jumpstart behavior change, intrinsic rewards sustain it over the long term. The transition from extrinsic to intrinsic motivation is crucial for momentum maintenance. You might start exercising to lose weight or improve your appearance, but you maintain momentum by discovering how exercise makes you feel stronger, more energetic, and mentally clearer. You might start learning a skill for career advancement, but you sustain progress by developing genuine curiosity about the subject matter itself. This transition requires patience and experimentation. You need to explore different approaches to improvement activities until you find aspects that feel intrinsically rewarding. Pay attention to how different activities make you feel, and prioritize those that generate genuine enthusiasm rather than mere obligation. Another crucial aspect of momentum psychology is what researchers call implementation consistency. This goes beyond simply doing the same behaviors. It involves doing them in the same way, at the same times, in the same contexts. This consistency creates what psychologists call behavioral automaticity, where actions become so routine that they require minimal conscious effort. When behaviors become automatic, they become much less vulnerable to motivation fluctuations, energy depletion, or environmental disruptions. You don't have to decide whether to exercise each morning. You simply exercise because that's what you do at that time in that context. The behavior has been programmed into your automatic behavioral repertoire. Building automaticity requires what researchers call context stability, performing behaviors in consistent environments with consistent cues. This might mean always exercising in the same location, always reading in the same chair, always practicing skills at the same time of day. The consistency helps your brain form strong associations between environmental cues and beneficial behaviors. But automaticity also creates vulnerability. When contexts change, automatic behaviors can be disrupted. Travel, schedule changes, or environmental disruptions can break behavioral chains that seemed robust in stable conditions. This is why momentum maintenance strategies must include both context stability and context flexibility. Context flexibility involves developing multiple pathways to maintain beneficial behaviors when primary contexts are unavailable. If you usually exercise at a gym, have a bodyweight routine ready for travel. If you usually read physical books, have digital alternatives for situations where carrying books is impractical. If you usually practice skills in a specific location, develop portable versions that work in various environments. The social dimension of momentum is equally important, because humans are inherently social beings, whose behavior is constantly influenced by social expectations, support, and comparison. When the people around you support and encourage your improvement efforts, momentum feels easier to maintain. When social environments are indifferent or hostile to your goals, momentum requires extra effort to sustain. Building social momentum involves what researchers call social identity integration, aligning your improvement goals with your social relationships and community involvement. This might mean finding workout partners who share your fitness goals, joining professional communities focused on skill development, or simply being more open with friends and family about your improvement efforts. Social momentum also benefits from what psychologists call social proof, evidence that other people like you have successfully achieved similar goals. This is why success stories and role models are so powerful for motivation. They provide evidence that your goals are achievable and your efforts are worthwhile. The cognitive dimension of momentum involves your thought patterns and mental frameworks around improvement. People who maintain momentum consistently think about improvement differently than those who struggle with consistency. They have what researchers call a growth mindset, the belief that abilities can be developed through dedication and hard work. This growth mindset creates resilience during challenging periods, because setbacks are interpreted as learning opportunities rather than evidence of inadequacy. When someone with a growth mindset struggles with a new skill, they think, "I haven't mastered this yet," rather than "I'm not good at this." When they experience a setback, they think, "What can I learn from this?" rather than "I'm a failure." Developing a growth mindset requires deliberate practice in reframing challenges and setbacks. Instead of saying, "I failed," practice saying, "I learned." Instead of saying, "This is too hard," try, "This will help me grow." Instead of saying, "I'm not good at this," reframe it as, "I'm improving at this." These cognitive shifts maintain momentum during difficult periods by preserving your sense of progress and possibility. The strategic dimension of momentum involves understanding when and how to adjust your improvement approach based on results and circumstances. Rigid adherence to initial plans can break momentum when those plans prove ineffective or circumstances change. But random changes can also break momentum by disrupting beneficial patterns and creating confusion. Effective momentum maintenance requires what researchers call strategic flexibility, the ability to adapt your approach while maintaining core principles. This might mean adjusting the timing of beneficial behaviors when schedules change, modifying specific activities while maintaining overall goals, or scaling behaviors up or down based on current capacity. This strategic flexibility requires regular review and reflection on your improvement efforts. Weekly or monthly assessments of what's working, what's not working, and what needs adjustment help you maintain momentum by ensuring your approach stays aligned with your circumstances and capabilities. You become a scientist studying your own improvement process, constantly experimenting and optimizing based on results. The ultimate goal of mastering momentum psychology is to create what researchers call behavioral persistence, the ability to maintain beneficial behaviors consistently over long periods, regardless of motivation levels, circumstances, or external pressures. When you achieve behavioral persistence, improvement stops being something you do occasionally and becomes something you are continuously. This transformation represents the deepest level of change, from someone who tries to improve to someone who simply improves as a natural part of their identity and daily experience. At this level, momentum becomes self-generating and self-sustaining, because improvement feels like the most natural thing in the world. Chapter 13. The compound effect in human development. The compound effect is perhaps the most misunderstood principle in personal development. Most people understand it mathematically. They know that small improvements accumulate over time, but they fail to grasp its profound implications for human psychology, neuroscience, and identity formation. When properly understood and applied, the compound effect becomes the most powerful force for transformation available to human beings. James Clear made it abundantly clear that if an individual decides and implements the strategy to get 1% better every day for 1 year, they will end up 37% better by the end of it. But this mathematical example understates the true power of compounding in human development. Because improvement isn't just additive, it's exponential. Each improvement makes the next improvement easier, faster, and more effective. Consider what happens when you commit to reading just 10 pages of challenging material every day. Initially, those 10 pages might take you an hour. You're struggling with unfamiliar concepts, looking up terms, rereading sections to understand their meaning. But after several weeks, something remarkable begins to happen. Your vocabulary has expanded, your background knowledge has grown, your reading comprehension has improved. Those same 10 pages that once took an hour now take 40 minutes. But the compound effect goes much deeper than simple efficiency gains. Dr. Joseph Murphy, a neuroscience researcher, notes, reading literally changes your brain, creating new white matter that improves communication within the brain. Just 20 minutes per day physically rebuilds your neural network. You're not just accumulating information, you're literally rewiring your brain for better learning, faster processing, and deeper understanding. This neurological compounding occurs in every domain of improvement. When you exercise consistently, you're not just building muscle or cardiovascular endurance, you're increasing the production of brain-derived neurotrophic factor, which enhances neuroplasticity and cognitive function. You're improving sleep quality, which consolidates learning and memory. You're reducing chronic inflammation, which improves both physical and mental performance. The compound effect in human development operates through multiple interconnected mechanisms. First, there's skill compounding. Each new capability makes learning related skills easier and faster. Learning one programming language makes learning additional languages significantly easier because you understand fundamental programming concepts and problem-solving patterns. Second, there's confidence compounding. Each success builds self-efficacy that transfers to new challenges. The person who successfully establishes one daily habit has evidence that they can establish others. This confidence reduction reduces the psychological resistance to attempting new improvements. Third, there's identity compounding. Consistent behaviors gradually reshape your self-concept, which in turn influences all future decisions. Every action is a vote for the type of person you wish to become. This is one reason why meaningful change does not require radical change. Small habits can make a meaningful difference by providing evidence of a new identity. Fourth, there's social compounding. As you improve, you naturally attract other people who value growth and improvement. These relationships provide support, accountability, and modeling that accelerates your continued development. You become part of what researchers call improvement networks that create positive peer pressure for continued growth. Fifth, there's opportunity compounding. Increased capabilities open doors to new opportunities that weren't previously available. The person who develops strong communication skills gets invited to more challenging projects, which develop their leadership abilities, which create opportunities for greater responsibilities and impact. But perhaps the most powerful aspect of compounding in human development is what could be called meta-skill compounding. As you improve in any domain, you're simultaneously developing general skills that apply across all areas of improvement. Focus, persistence, strategic thinking, emotional regulation, and learning how to learn. These meta skills accelerate progress in every other area of your life. When you're learning, you're actively creating new connections between the neurons in your brain. And if you repeat that knowledge enough and actively use it, those connections become stable and strong. This neural strengthening doesn't just improve your performance in specific skills, it enhances your overall capacity for learning and adaptation. The time dimension of the compound effect is crucial to understand, because it reveals why most people abandon improvement efforts prematurely. The progress we experience from the compounding effect of any habit isn't immediately visible. As a result, people give up quickly. They don't realize that every day they show up, they're building momentum. They are moving closer and closer to a breakthrough or inflection point. Researchers call this the valley of latent potential, the period where you're making progress, but the results aren't yet visible. During this phase, your brain is strengthening neural pathways, your skills are developing below the conscious threshold, and your identity is gradually shifting. But because these changes aren't immediately apparent, many people interpret this period as evidence that their efforts aren't working. Understanding this valley of latent potential is crucial for maintaining effort during the most challenging phase of improvement. The early weeks and months of any new improvement effort are when the compound effect is working most actively, but showing the least visible results. This is when neural pathways are forming, but not yet myelinated, when skills are developing but not yet coordinated, when identity changes are occurring but not yet consolidated. The breakthrough moment, when results suddenly become visible, isn't actually a breakthrough at all. It's the moment when accumulated changes finally cross the threshold of perception, like ice that remains solid at 31 degrees, but suddenly melts at 32 degrees. The transformation has been building gradually and finally becomes apparent. This understanding transforms how you relate to slow periods and plateaus in your improvement journey. Instead of interpreting lack of visible progress as failure, you begin to recognize these periods as evidence that the compound effect is working beneath the surface. Instead of becoming discouraged by apparent stagnation, you become excited about the breakthrough that you know is building. The compound effect also explains why small improvements are more powerful than large ones for creating lasting change. Large changes often create psychological and physiological stress that triggers homeostatic responses designed to return you to familiar patterns. Your brain interprets dramatic changes as potential threats and activates resistance mechanisms to maintain stability. Small improvements, in contrast, fly under the radar of these resistance mechanisms. Your brain doesn't perceive a 1% improvement as threatening, so it doesn't activate the same defensive responses. These small improvements accumulate gradually, allowing your brain to adjust incrementally rather than triggering dramatic resistance. This principle has profound practical implications for how you approach improvement. Instead of asking, "What dramatic change can I make to achieve rapid results?" you should ask, "What small improvement can I make consistently that will compound over time?" Instead of seeking transformation through intensity, you seek transformation through consistency. The compound effect also reveals why systems are more powerful than goals for creating lasting change. Goals focus your attention on specific outcomes at specific times. Systems focus your attention on the daily processes that create those outcomes. You get what you repeat. When you focus on improving your systems rather than achieving your goals, you harness the full power of compounding. Consider two people who want to write a book. Person A sets a goal to complete the book by December 31st and focuses all their energy on that deadline. Person B creates a system of writing 250 words every morning and focuses on improving their daily writing process. Person A might achieve their goal, but they'll likely struggle to write their next book because they haven't developed sustainable writing systems. Person B might not finish their book by any particular deadline, but they'll definitely finish it, and they'll have developed the capabilities to write many more books efficiently. The compound effect in systems thinking means that every improvement to your daily processes creates benefits that extend far beyond the immediate activity. When you improve your morning routine, you're not just optimizing a few hours, you're creating energy and momentum that improves your entire day. When you develop better decision-making frameworks, you're not just improving individual choices, you're upgrading the quality of thousands of future decisions. Understanding the compound effect also changes how you think about setbacks and failures. In a linear model of improvement, setbacks represent lost progress that must be recovered. In a compound model, setbacks are temporary pauses in an otherwise unstoppable trajectory. The skills, confidence, identity changes, and neural adaptations you've developed don't disappear during brief setbacks. They remain available to accelerate your recovery and continued progress. This perspective makes you more resilient during difficult periods because you understand that compound effects are robust and self-reinforcing. Even if external circumstances temporarily disrupt your progress, the internal changes you've created through consistent improvement continue working in your favor. The ultimate realization about the compound effect in human development is that it makes extraordinary results inevitable for anyone willing to commit to ordinary consistency. Small, smart financial decisions today can lead to massive wealth in the future. This same principle applies to every area of human development. Small, smart daily improvements lead to extraordinary capabilities over time. This inevitability is both inspiring and humbling. Inspiring because it means that anyone can achieve remarkable results through patient, consistent effort. Humbling because it reveals that most limitations are self-imposed through impatience, inconsistency, or failure to understand how compound effects actually work. When you truly understand and embrace the compound effect, improvement stops feeling like pushing a boulder uphill and starts feeling like riding a wave that grows stronger over time. You stop trying to force dramatic changes and start trusting the power of small, consistent improvements to create the extraordinary life you want to live. Chapter 14. The Science of Deliberate Practice. The difference between casual practice and deliberate practice is the difference between maintaining your current level and achieving extraordinary performance. Most people practice activities in ways that feel comfortable, familiar, and enjoyable. They repeat what they're already good at, avoid challenging aspects that expose their weaknesses, and stop when practice becomes difficult or frustrating. This approach might maintain existing skills, but it rarely creates significant improvement. Deliberate practice, in contrast, is specifically designed to improve performance. It involves focusing on your weaknesses, pushing beyond your current capabilities, and maintaining intense concentration, even when practice becomes difficult or unpleasant. This type of practice is uncomfortable by design because discomfort signals that you're working at the edge of your current abilities, where improvement actually occurs. Anders Ericsson showed that world-class performers, from violinists to surgeons, devote large blocks of time to deliberate practice. Focused, feedback-heavy drills designed to stretch skills at the edge of current ability. It's the quality and structure of the reps, not the hours alone, that predicts mastery. This research revolutionized our understanding of expertise by showing that natural talent plays a much smaller role than previously believed, while deliberate practice plays a much larger role. The key insight from Ericsson's research is that expertise is built through what he calls effortful practice, rather than playful practice. Effortful practice involves working on aspects of performance that are currently beyond your comfort zone, receiving immediate feedback on your performance, and making deliberate adjustments to improve specific weaknesses. Playful practice involves doing what you already know how to do in ways that feel enjoyable and non-threatening. Both types of practice have value, but only effortful practice creates significant improvement. This is why many people plateau in their development, despite years of experience. They engage in playful practice that maintains their current level while avoiding the effortful practice necessary for continued growth. The structure of deliberate practice follows specific principles that can be applied to any skill domain. First, you must identify specific aspects of performance that need improvement. This requires honest assessment of your current capabilities and clear understanding of where you want to improve. Many people practice ineffectively because they haven't identified specific areas for development. Second, you must design practice activities that specifically target these improvement areas. Generic practice activities might be enjoyable, but they're inefficient for developing specific skills. Deliberate practice involves creating or selecting practice exercises that focus intense attention on particular aspects of performance. Third, you must practice with full concentration and effort. Deliberate practice is mentally and often physically demanding. It requires the kind of focused attention that most people can sustain for only limited periods. This is why deliberate practice sessions are typically shorter than casual practice sessions. The intensity level cannot be maintained indefinitely. Fourth, you must receive immediate feedback on your performance. This feedback can come from coaches, mentors, self-monitoring, or measurement systems. The key is that you must know quickly whether your efforts are producing the desired results so you can make real-time adjustments to your technique. Fifth, you must repeat the practice frequently over extended periods. Deliberate practice isn't a one-time effort, but a systematic approach to skill development that requires consistent application over months and years. The most significant improvements come from sustained commitment to this type of practice. The neurological basis of deliberate practice involves what researchers call neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize and create new neural connections throughout life. Exercise physically elevates a specific protein in the brain that Dr. John Ratey calls miracle grow for the brain. Similar neuroplastic changes occur during any form of deliberate practice, not just physical exercise. When you practice at the edge of your capabilities, your brain responds by strengthening existing neural pathways and creating new ones. This process, called myelination, increases the speed and efficiency of neural transmission. Over time, skills that once required intense conscious effort become automatic and effortless. But neuroplasticity requires specific conditions to occur. The practice must be challenging enough to stimulate adaptation, consistent enough to drive change, and sustained long enough to create permanent modifications. Casual practice rarely meets these conditions, which is why it produces limited neurological changes. The psychological dimension of deliberate practice involves managing the discomfort and frustration that naturally arise when working at the edge of your capabilities. Most people interpret this discomfort as a sign that they should stop practicing or try an easier approach. But deliberate practice requires learning to view discomfort as a signal that growth is occurring. This psychological reframing is crucial because improvement necessarily involves failure, confusion, and temporary performance decrements. When you're working on skills that are beyond your current capabilities, you will make mistakes, feel frustrated, and sometimes perform worse than your established baseline. These experiences are not obstacles to improvement, they are the mechanisms through which improvement occurs. The emotional regulation required for deliberate practice involves what psychologists call frustration tolerance, the ability to continue working toward goals, despite experiencing negative emotions. This capacity can be developed through practice, just like any other skill. Each time you persist through difficulty during practice, you strengthen your ability to handle challenging emotions in the future. The attention dimension of deliberate practice involves what researchers call flow states, periods of complete absorption and optimal performance. However, the relationship between flow and deliberate practice is more complex than many people realize. While flow states often occur during peak performance, they rarely occur during deliberate practice, because deliberate practice is designed to be challenging and uncomfortable. The goal of deliberate practice isn't to achieve flow states, but to develop the capabilities that will allow flow states to emerge during actual performance. Deliberate practice expands your comfort zone and increases your skill level so that you can achieve flow during increasingly challenging activities. The motivation dimension of deliberate practice requires understanding the difference between intrinsic and extrinsic motivation. For effortful activity, deliberate practice is inherently demanding and often unpleasant, which makes it difficult to sustain based purely on intrinsic enjoyment. Most people need additional sources of motivation to maintain the effort required for deliberate practice. This is where long-term vision becomes crucial. People who engage in deliberate practice consistently are motivated not by the immediate experience of practice, but by the long-term identity and capabilities they're developing. They're willing to endure short-term discomfort for long-term transformation. The feedback dimension of deliberate practice involves creating systems for accurate, immediate, and specific information about performance quality. This feedback must be precise enough to guide adjustments and frequent enough to enable rapid learning. Without high-quality feedback, even intensive practice can reinforce incorrect techniques and create bad habits. In many domains, external feedback from coaches or mentors is essential because self-assessment is often inaccurate. People tend to focus on aspects of performance they're already good at, while overlooking areas that need improvement. Expert observers can identify weaknesses and suggest specific improvements that practitioners might miss. The progression dimension of deliberate practice involves systematically increasing the difficulty and complexity of practice activities as skills develop. This requires careful calibration to maintain optimal challenge levels, difficult enough to stimulate improvement, but not so difficult as to cause breakdown or injury. Effective progression in deliberate practice often involves what researchers call scaffolding, temporary support structures that enable practitioners to work on advanced skills before they're fully capable of performing them independently. As capabilities develop, these support structures are gradually removed until practitioners can perform complex skills without assistance. The time dimension of deliberate practice involves understanding that significant skill development requires sustained commitment over years, not weeks or months. Research suggests that achieving expert-level performance in complex domains requires approximately 10 years of deliberate practice, regardless of natural talent or favorable circumstances. This 10-year rule has important implications for how you approach skill development. Instead of seeking rapid improvement through intensive short-term efforts, you should plan for gradual, sustained improvement over extended periods. This long-term perspective helps maintain motivation during inevitable plateaus and setbacks. The transfer dimension of deliberate practice involves understanding which aspects of skill development generalize to other domains, and which remain domain-specific. While some elements of deliberate practice transfer broadly, most technical skills remain specific to particular domains. This means that becoming expert in one area doesn't automatically make you expert in others, but it does develop general capabilities that can accelerate learning in new domains. The meta-skills of deliberate practice, such as identifying weaknesses, designing effective practice activities, and maintaining effort through difficulty, become powerful tools for rapid skill acquisition in any area. When you understand and apply the principles of deliberate practice to your daily improvement efforts, you transform casual activity into systematic skill development. Instead of hoping that experience will lead to improvement, you design experiences specifically intended to create improvement. Instead of avoiding difficult aspects of performance, you focus on them intentionally. Instead of practicing what feels comfortable, you practice what challenges your current limitations. This shift from casual practice to deliberate practice accelerates improvement dramatically because it aligns your efforts with how skill development actually occurs. You stop wasting time on activities that feel productive but don't create growth, and you start investing time in activities that feel challenging but produce real capability enhancement. Most importantly, deliberate practice gives you control over your development rather than leaving improvement to chance. You become the conscious architect of your capabilities, systematically building the skills that will allow you to achieve whatever goals matter most to you. Chapter 15. The Philosophy of Continuous Improvement. At its deepest level, daily improvement is not merely a collection of techniques or strategies. It is a fundamental philosophy of life that shapes how you understand human potential, relate to challenges, find meaning in ordinary moments, and construct an identity that thrives on growth rather than fixed achievement. This philosophy provides the conceptual foundation that makes improvement sustainable, meaningful, and transformative. The philosophy of continuous improvement rests on several foundational beliefs about human nature and the nature of existence itself. The first of these beliefs is that human beings are fundamentally creative and adaptive, rather than fixed and limited. Unlike machines that operate within predetermined parameters, humans possess the remarkable capacity to transcend their current limitations through conscious effort, intelligent practice, and strategic thinking. This belief directly contradicts the fixed mindset that sees abilities as static and predetermined. It rejects the notion that you are permanently constrained by your genetics, your past experiences, your current circumstances, or your previous level of performance. Instead, it embraces the revolutionary understanding that your brain is constantly changing, your capabilities are continuously developing, and your potential is fundamentally unlimited. This doesn't mean that improvement is always easy, or that all people have identical starting points and advantages. It means that regardless of where you begin, meaningful improvement is always possible. Regardless of what limitations you face, some form of growth remains available. Regardless of how many times you've failed in the past, your capacity for positive change remains intact and renewable. The second foundational belief is that improvement is inherently meaningful, even when it doesn't produce dramatic external results or recognition. The philosophy of continuous improvement finds profound value in the process of growth itself, not just in the outcomes that growth might produce. The daily choice to become slightly better than you were yesterday is seen as one of the highest expressions of human dignity and purpose. This process-focused meaning-making stands in sharp contrast to the outcome-focused meaning that dominates contemporary culture. Modern society often suggests that your worth is determined by your achievements, possessions, status, or external recognition. The philosophy of continuous improvement suggests that your worth is determined by your commitment to growth, your willingness to face challenges, and your persistence in becoming the fullest expression of your potential. This shift in meaning-making is profoundly liberating because it makes fulfillment independent of external circumstances. You can find deep satisfaction in daily improvement regardless of whether others recognize your efforts, whether your progress is visible to outside observers, or whether you achieve conventional markers of success. The very act of committed growth becomes a source of meaning that no external force can diminish or destroy. The third foundational belief is that small, consistent actions are more powerful than large, sporadic efforts for creating lasting transformation. This belief reflects a deep understanding of how change actually works in complex systems like human psychology, behavior, and development. Real transformation happens through the accumulation of slight modifications over extended periods, rather than through dramatic single moments or intensive short-term efforts. This understanding challenges the cultural mythology of sudden breakthroughs and overnight success that pervades media narratives and popular culture. While breakthrough moments do occur, they are almost always the result of extensive preparation and consistent effort that preceded them. The visible breakthrough is simply the moment when accumulated changes finally become apparent to external observers. The philosophy of continuous improvement embraces what could be called the dignity of small things. It finds profound meaning in reading one page when you're exhausted, doing 5 push-ups when you're overwhelmed with responsibilities, practicing a skill for 10 minutes when you're distracted by competing priorities. These small actions might seem insignificant in isolation, but they represent something far more important: the decision to honor your commitment to growth, regardless of circumstances. This reverence for small, consistent actions creates a fundamentally different relationship with time and progress. Instead of feeling frustrated by the apparent slowness of improvement, you begin to appreciate the compound nature of development. Instead of becoming impatient with incremental progress, you begin to understand that incremental progress is the only mechanism through which lasting change actually occurs. The fourth foundational belief is that obstacles and setbacks are essential components of growth rather than unfortunate interruptions to it. The philosophy of continuous improvement sees challenges not as problems to be avoided, but as the very mechanisms through which development occurs. Without resistance, there would be no strengthening. Without confusion, there would be no learning. Without setbacks, there would be no resilience. This perspective transforms your relationship with difficulty from avoidance to engagement. Instead of trying to find the easiest path to your goals, you begin to appreciate that meaningful goals require meaningful challenges. Instead of becoming discouraged when improvement feels difficult, you begin to understand that difficulty is often a signal that significant growth is occurring. This doesn't mean seeking suffering for its own sake, or being careless about choosing appropriate challenges. It means recognizing that voluntary struggle in service of meaningful goals is fundamentally different from involuntary suffering that serves no constructive purpose. The philosophy of continuous improvement involves choosing your struggles consciously, rather than having them imposed upon you randomly. The fifth foundational belief is that improvement is inherently relational rather than purely individual. While improvement requires individual effort and commitment, it occurs within social contexts and ultimately serves purposes larger than personal achievement. Your growth influences the people around you, contributes to your communities, and becomes part of humanity's collective development. This relational understanding prevents improvement from becoming narcissistic self-obsession or competitive self-aggrandizement. When you understand that your personal development serves larger purposes, the daily work of improvement becomes an expression of service rather than self-indulgence. You're not just improving for your own benefit, you're improving to become more capable of contributing to others and to causes that matter beyond yourself. This perspective also provides additional motivation during difficult periods when personal reasons for improvement feel insufficient. Your consistency models possibility for others who are struggling with their own development. Your growth increases your capacity to help, support, and inspire others. Your development contributes to positive change in whatever communities and contexts you're part of. The sixth foundational belief is that improvement simultaneously involves becoming more authentically yourself and transcending your current self-limitations. This apparent paradox recognizes that authentic growth requires both discovering and expressing your unique qualities while also expanding beyond automatic patterns, unconscious limitations, and conditioned responses that no longer serve your highest potential. The becoming more yourself aspect involves identifying and developing your natural strengths, interests, and capacities. It means learning to honor your authentic preferences, values, and ways of engaging with the world. It involves becoming more skillful at expressing who you naturally are, rather than trying to become someone fundamentally different or incompatible with your essential nature. The transcending your current self aspect involves consciously evolving beyond limiting beliefs, automatic reactions, and habitual patterns that constrain your potential. It means developing capacities you didn't know you possessed, expanding into areas that once felt impossible, and becoming capable of expressions and contributions that your previous self couldn't imagine. Both aspects are necessary for authentic improvement. Without the becoming more yourself component, improvement becomes imitation and self-abandonment. Without the transcending your current self component, improvement becomes stagnation disguised as self-acceptance. The integration of both creates growth that feels both authentic and expansive. The seventh foundational belief is that the ultimate goal of improvement is not perfection but integration and wholeness. The philosophy of continuous improvement doesn't seek to eliminate all weaknesses, master all skills, or achieve some ideal state of flawless performance. Instead, it seeks to develop a balanced, integrated way of being that honors both strengths and limitations while continuously growing in wisdom, capability, and contribution. This integration-focused approach recognizes that human beings are inherently complex and multifaceted. Attempting to perfect individual aspects often creates imbalances and rigidity in other areas. The goal is not to become a perfect person but to become an increasingly whole person who embraces the full spectrum of human experience, while choosing conscious growth over unconscious stagnation. This perspective creates a healthier relationship with limitations and weaknesses. Instead of seeing them as problems to be eliminated, you begin to understand them as aspects of your humanity to be acknowledged and worked with intelligently. Instead of trying to become excellent at everything, you learn to develop your strengths, while managing your weaknesses and accepting aspects of yourself that may never change dramatically. The eighth and final foundational belief is that improvement is ultimately an expression of love. Love for yourself, love for others, and love for existence itself. The deepest motivation for continuous improvement is not achievement, recognition, or even personal satisfaction. It's the recognition that conscious growth is one of the most profound expressions of gratitude for the gift of consciousness and the opportunity to participate in the creative evolution of life. This love-based understanding transforms the entire emotional texture of improvement efforts. Instead of improvement feeling like discipline imposed from outside, it begins to feel like self-care and self-respect flowing from within. Instead of pushing yourself to change through willpower and force, you begin to invite yourself to grow through kindness and curiosity. Instead of forcing progress through harsh self-criticism, you begin to nurture development through compassionate persistence. This loving approach extends to how you treat yourself during the inevitable challenges and setbacks of any improvement journey. Instead of harsh self-criticism when you fall short of your intentions, you offer yourself the same compassion you would give to a beloved friend facing similar difficulties. Instead of abandoning yourself when you struggle, you recommit to supporting your growth with patience, understanding, and renewed dedication. When these 8 philosophical beliefs are integrated into your approach to daily improvement, they create a foundation that supports lifelong growth, regardless of external circumstances, temporary setbacks, or changing life conditions. Your improvement efforts become expressions of your deepest values, rather than responses to external pressure or internal inadequacy. Your consistency becomes a natural expression of who you are, rather than something you have to force through discipline and willpower. Most importantly, this philosophical foundation makes improvement sustainable and joyful rather than demanding and exhausting. When improvement flows from love rather than inadequacy, from curiosity rather than compulsion, from service rather than selfishness, the entire process becomes deeply fulfilling rather than merely productive. You discover that growth itself is the reward, that the process is the purpose, and that the journey of improvement is not preparation for life. It is life itself, lived at its fullest potential. This philosophical understanding represents the ultimate transformation available through daily improvement, not just becoming more capable or achieving better results, but becoming the kind of person for whom growth and contribution feel like the most natural expressions of being alive. When you reach this level of integration, improvement stops being something you do and becomes something you are. It stops being a practice and becomes a way of being, and it stops being a means to an end and becomes an end in itself, a beautiful, meaningful expression of human consciousness, actively participating in its own evolution. Conclusion: the infinite journey. As we reach the culmination of this comprehensive exploration into the science and practice of forcing yourself to improve every day, we arrive at a profound realization that transforms everything we've discussed. The journey of improvement is not a destination to reach, but an infinite game to play, a game where the purpose is not to finish, but to continue, not to win, but to keep growing, not to arrive somewhere, but to keep becoming. This shift in perspective from finite to infinite thinking revolutionizes your entire relationship with improvement. In finite games, you play to win, to beat others, to reach endpoints. There are clear rules, defined boundaries, and ultimate victors. But in infinite games, you play to keep playing, to keep the game interesting, to continuously expand the possibilities for growth and contribution. When you understand improvement as an infinite game, several transformative insights emerge. First, you realize that there is no finish line where you can declare yourself complete or perfect. Every level of capability you achieve simply opens up new possibilities for further development. Every skill you master reveals new skills to learn. Every challenge you overcome prepares you for more sophisticated challenges. This understanding liberates you from the frustration of never feeling done with self-development. Instead of improvement feeling like a burden you must carry until you reach some imaginary state of completion, it becomes an endless source of fascination, challenge, and joy. You stop asking, when will I be good enough, and start asking, what's possible now that wasn't possible before. Second, you realize that comparison with others becomes irrelevant, because everyone is playing their own unique infinite game with their own starting points, circumstances, goals, and possibilities. Your game is not to beat others, but to continuously expand your own capabilities and contributions. Success is measured not by ranking relative to others, but by progress relative to your own potential. This eliminates the anxiety and insecurity that comes from competitive thinking. You stop worrying about whether you're improving fast enough compared to others, and start focusing on whether you're making the most of your opportunities for growth. You stop being threatened by others' success, and start being inspired by the possibilities they demonstrate. Third, you realize that setbacks and failures are not obstacles to the game, but essential elements of it. In finite games, failure means you're losing. In infinite games, failure means you're learning. Every setback provides information that helps you play better. Every mistake reveals aspects of your game that need refinement. Every challenge makes the game more interesting and engaging. This reframe transforms your relationship with difficulty from resistance to curiosity. Instead of asking, how can I avoid this challenge, You ask, what can this challenge teach me? Instead of being discouraged by setbacks, you become interested in what they reveal about how to play your game more skillfully. Fourth, you realize that the rewards of improvement are not just in the outcomes you achieve, but in the person you become through the process of pursuing them, the skills you develop, the resilience you build, the wisdom you gain, the confidence you earn. These internal transformations are valuable regardless of any external achievements they might produce. This understanding makes every day of effort meaningful, even when progress feels slow or invisible. You're not just working toward future goals, you're actively becoming a more capable, resilient, and wise person today. The journey is the destination, because the journey is continuously transforming who you are. The infinite gain perspective also reveals why some people maintain improvement efforts for decades, while others abandon them after weeks or months. Those who understand improvement as an infinite gain find the process intrinsically rewarding. They improve not because they have to reach specific destinations, but because they enjoy the continuous expansion of their capabilities and understanding. Those who approach improvement as a finite game burn out when the initial excitement fades, when progress slows, or when they achieve their initial goals and don't know what to do next. Without the infinite perspective, improvement becomes unsustainable because it depends entirely on external motivation and specific outcomes. The transition to infinite gain thinking requires several shifts in how you conceptualize and engage with improvement. Instead of setting fixed goals with definite endpoints, you establish evolving visions that expand as you grow. Instead of measuring success by achieving specific targets, you measure success by the consistency and quality of your engagement with the process of growth. Instead of focusing primarily on what you want to get from improvement, you focus on what you want to give through your development. Instead of improving to prove yourself to others, you improve to increase your capacity for contribution and service. Instead of seeing improvement as something you do to become worthy, you see it as how you express your worthiness. This shift from getting to giving, from proving to improving, from becoming worthy to expressing worthiness, transforms improvement from a burden into a gift. You're not improving because you're inadequate. You're improving because you're so full of potential that not developing it would be a waste of the extraordinary opportunity to be conscious in a universe that seems designed to reward consciousness with ever greater possibilities. The science we've explored throughout this journey provides the roadmap for playing this infinite game. Skillfully, you understand that your brain is constantly changing and that you can direct that change through deliberate practice and consistent effort. You know that small improvements compound exponentially over time, creating transformations that seem miraculous but are actually predictable. You've learned that habits can be engineered through environmental design and strategic repetition. You understand that identity shifts through accumulated evidence of who you're becoming. You know how to build momentum, overcome resistance, and recover from setbacks. You've mastered the mental game of improvement and discovered how to make change sustainable and enjoyable. But most importantly, you've learned that improvement is not about forcing yourself to become someone different. It's about removing the obstacles that prevent you from expressing who you truly are. The force in forcing yourself to improve is not violence against your nature, but clarity about your potential and commitment to realizing it. This understanding reveals the deepest truth about daily improvement. You don't improve because you're broken and need fixing. You improve because you're already extraordinary, and improvement is how you express that extraordinariness more fully. Every day you choose growth over comfort. You're not overcoming some fundamental flaw. You're honoring the magnificent creative potential that exists within you. As you continue forward on this infinite journey, remember that you are playing a game that has no end, no final victory, no ultimate completion. There will always be new capabilities to develop, new contributions to make, new ways to express your potential more fully. This is not a limitation. It's the greatest gift imaginable. You have been given consciousness in a universe that seems designed to reward conscious development with ever-expanding possibilities for experience, understanding, and contribution. You have been given the ability to deliberately direct your own evolution, to consciously participate in your own becoming, to actively choose who you are and who you're becoming. This opportunity is both a privilege and a responsibility. The privilege is that you get to play this infinite game of improvement. The responsibility is to play it well, to take your potential seriously, to develop your capabilities consciously, to use your gifts in service of something larger than yourself. The transformation that lies ahead of you, is not just personal, it's part of humanity's collective evolution toward greater consciousness, capability, and contribution. Every time you choose growth over stagnation, you're voting for a universe that values development over decay. Every time you persist through difficulty, you're demonstrating that consciousness can overcome conditioning, that awareness can transcend automaticity, that humans can choose their evolution rather than being passive victims of circumstance. Your daily improvement is your participation in the greatest story ever told, the story of consciousness awakening to its own potential and actively participating in its own evolution. This is why forcing yourself to improve every day is not just a personal development strategy, it's a spiritual practice, a form of worship, a way of honoring the extraordinary gift of being conscious in a universe that supports consciousness with unlimited potential for growth. The journey of daily improvement that you've embarked upon is infinite, which means it's also eternal. Every step you take is both complete in itself and part of an endless journey. Every improvement you make is both an achievement and a beginning. Every day you choose growth is both a victory and an invitation to continue playing the most meaningful game possible. As you wake up tomorrow and every day after, you face the same fundamental choice that has been available to conscious beings throughout history. Will you choose growth or stagnation? Will you express your potential or hide from it? Will you play the infinite game of becoming or settle for the finite game of remaining? The choice is always yours. The opportunity is always present, the possibility is always unlimited, and the next move in your infinite game of improvement begins now. Remember to like this video if it has served your journey of growth, and subscribe to this channel for continued exploration of human potential and the infinite game of conscious development. Your improvement is not just about you, it's about all of us becoming more than we've ever been before. Play well, grow freely, and never stop becoming.